Oh, you had more than that. I did not.
I see Aaron in the attendee box from Albany.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. We're just waiting for a couple more board members to file in, and then we'll get started in just a minute. Hope everybody's doing well on this wonderful Wednesday evening. And hi, Kana from Piedmont. How are you?
Thank you.
Have you? I just a note of procedure. Have you been sworn in?
I've been sworn in as a alternate, not, but now I'm taking over for Mayor King, but I haven't been voted in yet by my council, so you might want to wait on that.
No, that's fine. I think
Okay.
being sworn in as the alternate is just as good. That's the same
Okay.
swearing in, so,
All right.
you're good.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Clerk, does it appear we have a quorum? If you think so, then we could take the roll.
Count 13. Yeah, so we can go ahead and get started.
Okay, welcome everybody, and we'll start with the taking of the roll.
Great. Alameda County. Alameda County.
I'm going to say yes, and I'll go back to the
Did I hear a vote? Albany.
Here.
Berkeley. Berkeley. Dublin.
Here.
Fremont.
present.
Fremont.
Teddy. Hold on. Hold on.
Hayward.
Present.
Livermore.
Here.
Newark.
Here.
Piedmont. Yeah, just
Here,
Piedmont.
here.
Pleasanton.
Here.
San Leandro. San Leandro.
Present. Present.
Tracy.
Present.
Union City.
Here.
Community Advisory Committee.
Present.
Emeryville.
Here.
And Oakland.
Present. Thank you.
We have a quorum.
We have a quorum. That's a good thing because we can't have a meeting without a quorum. Okay, colleagues, thank you, and welcome to everybody, and welcome to all those who are in the attendee queue as well. And Mr. Clerk, we're starting. Correct me if I'm wrong. We're going to start with the general public comment. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so all those in the attendee box, if you're interested in providing some public comment now on items of interest to EBCE but are not on the agenda tonight, please raise your hand to do so. And Mr. Clerk, you can call them in whatever order makes sense, and we'll go from there. And let's we have a long agenda, so I'm going to ask that we do 2 minutes each for public comment today.
Great. So hold on 1 second. And Jada Dormaz Dogon, recognizing you for 2 minutes.
Thanks, Adrian. Hi, Jada Durmaz Dogan with the Local Clean Energy Alliance and East Bay Clean Power Alliance. The wildfire season is fast approaching and PG&E's response will be to shut our power off. So I think it's time for our public agency to respond in a way that will prove to our communities that EBC is on our side. Community-based organizations' response to power shutoffs is developing microgrid resilience hubs, and we need islandable solar and storage for these resilience hubs so that they will be able to continue to provide critical services during power shutoffs. EBC should partner with those community-based organizations to help them overcome some of the barriers, especially technical and financial, and you will hear from others about this issue as well, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to recognize Jessica Tovar. Jessica Tovar, I've unmuted you for 2 minutes.
Okay, I think I'm on. Jessica Tovar with East Bay Clean Power Alliance. Similar to what Shada said, you know, our communities definitely need the support of our local community choice program when it comes to establishing energy resilience for resilience hubs in the community. One thing I want to highlight is that under the critical facilities, community trusted and community driven resilience hubs do not fall under the investment for critical facilities from our local community choice program. So we really need East Bay Community Energy to step up and support getting islandable solar and battery storage for resilience hubs, because we are going to be experiencing power shutoffs for the next 10 years, because that is PG&E's approach to preventing wildfires. And let me just highlight, it's not working. We're having wildfires anyway. So what we really need at this time that we're living in a multitude of crises is we need investments in resilience hub, islandable solar and battery storage for community trusted locations. We understand that under critical facilities, you will be doing the same kind of infrastructure for police stations, for fire stations. But when you think about communities and specifically immigrant communities, we're not going to be running to the police station to be able to power up and contact our communities in the event of a crisis. So we do need our trusted community resilience hubs to have access to the islandable and solar that we're going to need to weather these various storms. One of the hugest issues that I'm seeing, the biggest issue in this climate emergency, is that energy equity is often undercut in the name of profit. We need to change that, and we need East Bay Community Energy to support us in getting clean power to the people. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Olivia Pack, I'm unmuting you for 2 minutes.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Livesey Pack, and I'm speaking today on behalf of SPUR. I'd like to speak briefly about Senate Bill 617, a piece of legislation co-sponsored by SPUR and Environment California, and to ask for East Bay Clean Energy's support of SB 617. SB 617 will streamline solar permitting, provide a low-cost stimulus to local municipalities, and create a more resilient energy future for our state. The bill promotes these goals in two critical ways. First, SB 617 will create a $20 million grant program to provide cities and counties with the resources needed to implement automated permitting for small rooftop residential solar systems and solar plus storage systems. Second, SB 617 capitalizes on a new technological solution for automated solar permitting. The federal government has been engaged in the issue of soft costs around solar installation and permitting for several years and has now developed an automated permitting platform called Solar App. Solar App is completely free for jurisdictions to adopt. It's already being piloted in California. In fact, just last week, the city of Pleasant Hill went live with Solar App and with instant solar permitting. And it was built on best practices from the state of California, including the Solar Permitting Guidebook. When we think about the next decade, we know that now is the moment to accelerate our transition to clean energy and to transition our homes to low or no carbon. The need to standardize and streamline the permitting process for all of this work will only increase. We look to East Bay Clean Energy as leaders in the clean energy movement and look forward to continued conversations on SB 617 with all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm recognizing Alita Dupree for 2 minutes. Alita, you are able to speak now.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Chair Dan Kalb and board members, Alita Dupree for the record, she and her. Always good to be back with you. I believe in a bright and exciting future of EBCE. Many public utilities I've come across in my years and experience. EBC is truly a visionary organization. I thank you for that. I've been thinking a lot about curtailment of renewables that happens across the state. And how can we get some of that for ourselves so it's not left to waste? I kind of imagine that when I spill something on the counter, I take a paper towel, and that which is beyond the paper towel is slowly absorbed toward the paper towel and picked up. How can we be that paper towel to absorb and store that renewable energy? 340 million kilowatt hours were curtailed in the Cal ISO network in the month of March. You can run the New York City subway for 2 months of that. It's a very big system, much bigger than BART. I'm sure some of you have seen it, maybe even used it. Lots of trains. So I'd like for us to get some of that. Electricity rates are very high in California, and we're doing our part in keeping them down through affordable generation and value propositions. But I hope someday we can reach and become a distribution and transmission utility so we can control those rates ourselves, because I believe in the oversight of EBCE, a public agency that allows me to speak at your meetings as I'm doing now. That's a big reason why I believe in public power, because it allows the public to participate. So let's work on our local development, storage, and solar. I would be perfectly happy living next to a solar power plant. Unfortunately, I can't have solar panels on my rooftop because I rent. We got a lot to do, and let's do it. Thank you.
Susan Silver, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
Great, thank you so much. My name is Susan Silver, and I'm the director of the NorCal Resilience Network, and leading a leadership training, which we are working with 40 sites to support developing resilient hubs around Northern California. As spelled out by some of the people who spoke before, it's very, very important to recognize, to support resilient hubs and fund them with solar and battery backup. Resilient hubs offer some of the most promising and equitable approaches to scaling up resilience to face these coming challenges, which we know is going to be wildfires. There's going to be lots of wildfires this year, as we know. Resilient hubs are trusted community centers and spaces that can serve as gathering spaces to distribute resources, exchange information, and express community care, while supporting community programs and demonstrations for climate solutions year-round. They focus on shifting power to the community. So we would like you to support these resilient hubs, community-driven resilience hubs, not just the critical facilities, and fund them because they are mostly located in underserved communities who are going to be most impacted by the power shutoffs. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We're going to recognize Igor Trigub. Igor Trigub, I am unmuting you now.
Great, thank you so much. And whoops. let me know when my timer is set. Perfect. Hi, I'm Igor Trego. It's an honor to join you today. I'm still in Sacramento, where we had a rally in opposition to Assembly Bill 1139 earlier today, a horrible proposal that will kill rooftop scale solar. And one of our board members, Berkeley Council member, Kate Harrison, spoke really well. I wanted to lift up comments by Livesey Pak as well about, I'm calling AB 1139 the bad bill, SB 617, the Rooftop Scale Solar Act, is the good bill. And I reserve the balance of my time to just lift up comments that have been made in support of EBCE to provide funding and technical support for local resilience hubs. I'm speaking as a member of the Sierra Club, as a member of the East Bay Clean Power Alliance, and as of this year, as a member of the NorCal Resiliency Hub Network. And of course, developing community resilience hubs is an equity issue, as vulnerable communities are hardest hit by power shutoffs and climate disasters. This was an issue in our Berkeley community when I served in elected office there, and a number of my constituents, the ones that had the fewest resources, were hardest hit. And I know that for your communities, the same is true. So I urge you to think creatively and to work with the Resiliency Hub and other community organizations to reimagine community power for this very important function. Thank you so much for your time and all the good work that you're doing.
Thank you. I'm recognizing Marjana Moini. Marjana Moini, you are.
Hi, I live in Oakland, and I speak on behalf of Physicians for Social Responsibility, San Francisco Bay chapter. We, on behalf of our patients and our community, we strongly urge you to support the resilience hubs. It has been already detailed by other speakers. Our patients and our vulnerable members of the community need to be supported. So I'm very much hoping that you will do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Alan Marling. Alan Marling, I am recognizing you now. Hold on one second.
All right. Alan, Livermore resident, he, them. I'm thinking forward to the next fire season and remembering, unfortunately, what happened the last one. The dystopian gray sky depressed me, and when it cleared to a sparkling blue, I was eager to get outside and breathe deeply. Only when I did so, I found I couldn't. I was still feeling short of breath. I was still feeling ill from days under this poisonous cloud. And that scares me because the poisonous smoke goes through masks, it goes into your house. One of the few things that gave me comfort was hearing my air filter going in my room. And I would hate to think what would happen if that air filter was turned off, if my energy was turned off because of PG&E is unable to protect us any other way than turning off their power. That's unacceptable. What we need are resilience hubs. We need islandable solar and battery storage. Again, we need resilience hubs, islandable solar, and battery storage. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I'm recognizing Michelle Ellison. Michelle Ellison, I'm unmuting you now.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Michelle Ellison. I'm in the town of Ojai, which is part of Clean Power Alliance, CPA for short. Like EBCE, CPA is a recently formed community choice energy agency. I'm calling in today because I understand some of your member communities are considering a possible default change to 100% renewable energy, which would be absolutely fantastic. We have a good deal of experience with that in CPA, so I just wanted to share a few highlights in case they'd be helpful to you. The default is the most immediate, cost-effective, and significant way that I'm aware of to dramatically cut emissions and make real progress on our climate commitments. So just briefly, CPA launched service 2 years ago for 3 million people across 32 member municipalities in Los Angeles and Ventura counties. 15 of those 32 have set their defaults at 100% renewable energy, which means about 750,000 people have virtually eliminated emissions from their electricity supply. These communities are diverse in many ways. For example, the city of Oxnard with over 200,000 people, 85% of which are minority and 40% low income. It's now the largest city in the US on 100% renewable energy because of the default setting. In CPA, the 100% default is being applied to both residential and non-residential customers, including low income. To address the concern about the financial impact on low income customers, CPA created an innovative approach whereby customers on care, FARA, medical baseline receive the 100% product at no extra cost. It's subsidized among other ratepayers. From an environmental justice perspective, this allows every customer an opportunity to be a champion for clean energy and not leave anyone behind in the transition. So I encourage this board and staff to explore creating something like this for your customers, low-income customers, ideally at your next board meeting before the default decisions are due or before they go into effect. I'm sure CPA staff would be happy to share more information, or I'm happy to help also. I've been helping other cities going to 100%. You can reach me at Michelle, M-I-C-H-E-L-L-E, Leahy, L-E-A-H-Y at hotmail.com or 414-915-4140. I'm happy to serve as a resource. Thank you.
Thank you. Jean Wu. Jean Wu, you're recognized for 2 minutes. Jean Wu. Perhaps we can come back to Jean Wu.
Unmute. There we go. Yeah, I just had no idea how to start. I think it's extremely important that EBCE look very carefully at developing community-based resiliency hubs, aka microgrids, that includes solar and energy storage, because we need to have these kind of nodes to support communities that could be hard hit after the PSPS or eventually after an earthquake. And these are going to pay back in many different ways because they also support multifamily and can support renters, which is something we have difficulty with when doing it house by house. And I'm happy to help with any kind of planning that could go into this. And I think you need to really think about diverting resources to create these hubs, because we are going to be faced with wildfires essentially for the rest of the foreseeable future. Thank you.
Thank you. Nick Peterson. Nick Peterson.
Yeah.
You are unmuted.
Thank you very much. I applaud EBCE for working to establish community resilience hubs in their customer areas. It is important that all the community is informed of these efforts and that EBCE notify critical public entities in each municipality in addition to the city government. Many cities have a distinct division of authority between the city government and the local unified school district. Albany is such a community, and I live in Albany. In recent polling that EBC did of its customer base, EBCE contacted municipal entities but did not contact school districts directly to determine if there are essential community facilities that need coordination for emergency power and resilience. Schools are important community assets and provide locations out of which emergency response activities can be coordinated and operated, so they would make excellent community resilience hubs. I strongly encourage EBCE to contact school district administration throughout their service area to determine the extent of school facilities that would benefit from any development of emergency backup power or resilience measures, especially backup power and battery. So I think a lot of the community centers that could be made available can piggyback on school district buildings, and school districts need to be contacted and made aware that this is being pursued by EBCE. Also, I would like to encourage you to do whatever you can to help stop AB 1139, which will kill rooftop solar in California and will be a disaster for the state and renewable energy. All of us who are eagerly went to community aggregation groups for our power, we're doing that to promote solar, to promote the expansion of solar within our own communities, which is best done by rooftop solar. This is just a ploy by the profit-motivated utility corps to increase their profits build more long-range transmission lines, which we don't need because we have local and resilient power. So please do all you can on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Lincoln Oliver O'Neill, you are unmuted for 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Lincoln Oliver O'Neill, and I am a member of Sunrise Bay Area, the East Bay Clean Power Alliance, and also a student at Laney College pursuing a certificate in rooftop solar installation. I'm speaking to you today to urge the board, as you set your budget next month, to allocate even more resources to equitable energy resilience infrastructure, such as rooftop solar and battery storage in low-income communities and communities of color in Alameda County and Tracy. As you all are aware, EBCE only came to be through the sustained advocacy of organizations rooted in Alameda County like those who are speaking to you today. These organizations have intimate knowledge of the needs of their families, friends, and neighbors. EBCE was born out of this in a bold new model, supposedly centered on investing in local development projects, providing the benefits of local renewable energy to community members. And as you have heard on this call, these same community members are back and telling you we need more investment in community-centered resilience hubs. Myself and my fellow solar installer students at Laney College are concerned that EBCE is not making good on its promise to promote local workforce development and provide community benefits to low-income communities and communities of color. As you consider your budget, investing in equitable energy resilience provides an opportunity to bring clean power to the people and make good on your promise to promote local workforce development. Thank you, and I strongly urge you to increase funding for resilience hubs in the budget vote next month.
Thank you. Audrey Ichinose. Audrey Ichinose, you are recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you. Audrey Ichinose, Clean East Bay Clean Power Alliance, and the California Alliance for Community Energy. I also want to add my support for more funding and more effort in building these islandable microgrids fed by solar plus storage systems in many of our impacted communities. I would like to add 2 things. One is, and that is to note the obstacles that which are real to creating these community microgrids, but which are within EBCE and the board's power to overcome. The weightier of the 2 is Public Utility Code paragraph 218, which maintains PG&E's rigid monopoly over the local delivery of the electricity that EBCE buys for its customers. We're talking about the distribution lines referred to as behind the meter, as opposed to the front of the meter long distance transmission lines. The revision of PUC 218 would in effect allow EBCE to build out islandable microgrids in our communities. A second obstacle to building resilient microgrids is the diminishing enthusiasm for rooftop solar. As Igor Tregub outlined, AB 1139 poses a big threat to rooftop solar. This legislation would raise low-income discounts, which is good, while at the same time subjecting all ratepayers to significantly increased transmission fees. This is a typical PG&E bait and switch move that would maintain its profits and control at the expense of California's clean air goals. But these 2 formidable hurdles can be overcome by the combined weight of EBCE investment and more political agitation on the part of board members and community organizations alike, both locally and at the state level. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Audrey. We have Aisha Abbasi. Aisha Abbasi, you are unmuted.
Great, thank you. Good evening. My name is Aisha Abbasi with the Asian Pacific Environmental Network, serving as the Solar on Multifamily Affordable Housing Outreach Coordinator here with East Bay Clean Power Alliance to support the call for East Bay Community Energy to provide funding and technical support for local resilience hubs. These hubs are a top priority for APEN this year as we advocate for our bill for resilience hubs, AB 1087, all because of our community's experiences with the significant hardships brought on by wildfires, power outages, a global pandemic, and other disasters. And we know East Bay Community Energy in the state can do more to help build ongoing resilience. Despite resource constraints and poor infrastructure, we saw mutual aid networks give out masks, nonprofits who opened their doors as offices, open doors to their offices as charging stations and for refrigeration, and organizations like ours conducting in-language outreach to residents. Our communities have institutions that they trust as spaces to organize, and this is what keeps our communities safe and healthy. So getting East Bay Community Energy to support and providing sufficient resources to scale up these community-driven, place-based resilience approaches is critical and will bring more opportunity and resources that our communities deserve. Hope you'll move this point forward, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. We have Alice Sung next. Alice, you are recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you so much. Thank you to the board for your ability to give us this opportunity. I'm a resident and proud member of the services from East Bay Clean Energy. And I am here to also represent architects, United States Green Building Councils, and Climate Reality Bay Area chapters, over 1,000 members that are dedicated to the service of spreading awareness of the climate crisis and moreover the solutions. And one of those happens to be the resilience hubs that have been already spoken to so wonderfully tonight. I would like to add a couple of points to that. It would be of great importance for not only the school districts to be contacted and for that outreach, which has already been brought up, but also moreover to come together with the community-based organizations such as East Bay Clean Power Alliance and other organizations locally with the public school districts and the municipalities to actually work together to identify and moreover prioritize where the best sites would be for such local community resilience hubs. You can then identify areas where many of the schools have solar and also where they don't and where they are most needed to those frontline communities in low-income neighborhoods. And I urge you to work together with your community and your school districts to define and prioritize these in your investments. And lastly, I want to also add on to working with us to help defeat AB 1139, a regressive bill that would kill rooftop solar and be exacerbation to our efforts for these community resilience hubs. So thank you again for your support and your time.
Thank you. We have 2 speakers left. Laura Nicodemus, you are recognized for 2 minutes.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
I just wanted to make a short statement to say that I am in the Northern California Resilience Network hub training right now, and I'm just so thrilled by the opportunity to be able to participate in a program like this. It's like, it feels like it's groundbreaking in a really critical moment in history, and hope that you will really support it to your greatest possibility. Second, I live across the street from a school in East Oakland and would certainly love to approach this school as a potential hub, and don't currently feel like I have the sort of greater bureaucratic support to do that. And so I really support the idea of contacting schools and bringing them into this network. And thanks very much for your time. That's it.
Thank you. Lastly, we have Vaughn.
I'm assuming you can hear me. This is a great idea about the resiliency hubs. I've been trying to search it on the web since everybody's been bringing up. What technology are they going to use? Batteries only last for 2 to 4 hours. That's not exactly what the resilience would do for, say, the fire things that went on last year. I have solar panels on my roof. When the smoke was in the air, the productivity of them dropped by half, easily by 50%. I couldn't run my house off of them. And even if I had a battery, I choose not to because I think it's a waste of money until we have a long duration storage. It's a good idea to start planning these things, but until you have the technology, and there's 4 or 5 different technologies out there in the world for long duration storage, relying on batteries is not a smart idea. If somebody has the way it's really going to be done, if they could put it into the chat, I'd like to do some research on it. But at this stage of the game, we don't have the technology to do what most of these people are asking for, but it's a good time to start planning. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was the last speaker for public comment.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clerk. Appreciate that very much. Thank you all for your very helpful public comments. And of course, as we go through the agenda today, those of you who have comments on specific agenda items will have another opportunity to share those comments again. Okay, so Mr. Clerk, let's go on to the next item as soon as I have it in front of me. And that'll be approval of the minutes. Colleagues, any comments or questions about the minutes of April 21st? If not, I'm happy to entertain a motion.
Mike Hanna from the city of Newark to move the minutes.
Thank you.
A second.
That's Councilmember Harrison from Berkeley, second. I see no hands raised. I see no members of the public issuing any comment on the minutes. So let's go for a roll. Oh, now I see one hand raised. Mary Sutter.
Just a point to make is that the minutes are under the consent agenda, along with several other items.
Oh, my apologies. I had it wrong on my notes here. You're right, they are. So I'm going to ask that we retract the motion and ask my colleagues if they have any items to pull off of the consent agenda before we vote on that full consent calendar. Thank you, Mary, for pointing out that mistake on my part. Appreciate that. Okay, there are a number of items on the consent agenda, so just review your agenda just to make sure you don't want to pull anything off. If you do want to pull something off the consent agenda, now's the time to raise your hand. Okay, I'm not seeing anything. So I will ask for a motion. Nick, did you have a question?
More a comment. I just wanted to point to, and this is not actually to suggest to pull it off.
Appeal for your TPS now. In other news this afternoon, Joe Biden.
Somebody has their. We're going to need to mute somebody here. Okay, there we go.
And I just wanted to point that there are 2 consulting agreements on the consent, items 9 and 10, for AeroP and EcoMotion, and those are both engineering service agreements for the first 40 or so resiliency hubs that we are seeking to deploy across our service territory.
Excellent, thank you. So I'm happy to entertain a motion, or if anybody has any quick questions on the consent agenda. If there are quick questions, we don't have to pull an item off. You could just ask the question as part of the agenda. I'm not seeing any hands raised. So I'll entertain a motion. Who was that?
Brittany Kick. I'll move consent.
Councilmember Kick.
Seconded.
And that was
Narum from Pleasanton.
Councilmember Narum from Pleasanton. Okay. Mr. Clerk, do we have any members of the public who wish to comment on the consent agenda?
There is no one signed to speak to the consent agenda.
Okay, I'm not seeing any hand raised. So, Mr. Clerk, please call the roll on the consent calendar.
Great. Alameda County. Alameda County. Albany.
Yes.
Berkeley.
Yes.
Dublin.
Yes.
Fremont. Fremont. Hayward.
Yes.
Livermore.
Yes.
Newark.
Aye.
Piedmont.
I, with the exception of approval of the minutes, I'll abstain since I wasn't there.
Pleasanton.
Yes.
San Leandro,
Aye.
Tracy,
Yes.
Union City,
Yes.
Emeryville,
Aye.
Oakland.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll go to the our CEO report. Nick and staff.
Yes, thank you. So we have been busy with our various committees. So in the last month, each of our subcommittees has met at least once. Our executive committee met at its regularly scheduled April meeting. Our finance and administration committee met to discuss the budget and the prepay, which are both items on tonight's agenda. And our marketing, regulatory, and legislative committee met for a special meeting on May 11th to discuss the Roots sponsorship or Roots partnership. We continue to hold our special board retreats. And this is actually something we're going to be sharing, inviting our new CAC members to, and also sharing links to the recorded ones, just so they have an opportunity to get up to speed on all of our, all of the operational matters that are presented during those meetings. Our next two are in June and July, and one is on public policy, the other is on marketing. On the marketing and account services update front, we continue to, through the enrollment process, the notification process for our 3 new communities. This month is the last set of notifications we're going to be sending to customers. And so, this is sort of when we tend to see the last big spike in opt-outs, and then we kind of go to the steady state, usually 2 months after the enrollment. So as things currently stand, our average opt-outs are 3.46%, with a low of 2% in Newark and a high of 4% in Tracy, all in line with our expectations. So I think all good on that front. The time of use transition is kicking off in May for residential customers. A number of webinars have been held by PG&E. This transition is really being led by PG&E. Our primary outreach has been focused on outreach to customers who would see a cost associated with the transition, and letting them know that they have the opportunity to default or maintain their current volumetric charges. And so this has been a kind of a proactive effort to make sure that those customers who we call our structural losers or financial losers from the transition know that they don't actually have to pay more money. And then finally, we have added a page to our website focused on financial assistance, ebce.org/customer assistance. And this is where we outline everything from the process to sign up for CareFera to the AMP program, and provide a number of good resources for customers who may be facing challenges in paying their utility bills. We did release a Earth Day video with the Oakland Roots and a Oakland-born player, Johannes Yaharish, which we shared around and actually got a lot of fun attention on social media. We did issue a statement against anti-Asian racism, and finally we have made our latest round of hyper-local sponsorships to 9 organizations. These are organizations that operate across the service territory. So, in Oakland, we sponsored Community Kitchens, which is purchasing hot meals from local restaurants to distribute to the unhoused community. They gave a grant to the Hayward Chamber of Commerce to host shredding and recycling event for local businesses. Gave a sponsorship to Housing Consortium of the East Bay to provide solar to homeless encampments and safe parking sites. Gave a grant to Hively in Pleasanton to provide low-income families with a month's supply of diapers and wipes. We gave a grant to local ecology and agriculture Fremont to install an automatic irrigation system for the newest leaf food garden. Gave a grant to the Castro Valley Independent Sports League to fund health screening for players and coaches. We gave a grant to We Love Pie in Fremont to buy hardware for robot and register teams for robotics competitions. We gave a grant to Roots of Success Environmental Literacy and Work Readiness Program to provide teaching materials for free of charge to teachers and staff in East Bay schools. And finally, we gave a sponsorship to Sunflower Hill to support their cooking class program, which provides a wide variety of programs for chefs of all ability levels and is specifically designed for adults with IDD. So lots of good stuff there. That is what I have to share on the CEO report front.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you, as always, to our amazing EBCE staff for all the great work they do week in and week out. Colleagues, I'll ask if there are any questions or comments from board members on any of the sections of the CEO report. I'm seeing no hand raised. If you're thinking about it, Mr. Clerk, do we have any members of the public who are wishing to make any public comment on this agenda item?
There's no one signed up to speak to this item.
Okay, and I'm not seeing any hands raised there either. Oh, I see one hand raised. Okay, let's invite Jessica Tovar to make public comment on this item.
Jessica Tovar, I am unmuting you now.
Yeah, I just want to highlight something. I am concerned about, making huge budget sponsorship commitment outside of the entire budget. This kind of dynamic happened last year with electric vehicle infrastructure and incentives, and it ended up being 70% of the budget. So I can't help but notice that we're having to vote on an issue that is not with the rest of the budget. And I think that that's how we perpetuate problems with not allocating money towards equity. So I just wanted to highlight that. And just to note too, that these huge sponsorships are really distracting from critical issues that are happening right now in the community. And I need to highlight that because it's really frustrating. So I'm just going to leave it at that.
Okay, thank you, Jessica. I'm not seeing any more hands raised. Back to the board. Not seeing any hand raised. We don't need any motion on this informational item. So I'm going to ask that we move on to our next agenda item, and that's our Community Advisory Committee report.
Good evening, folks. Two things to relay to you tonight. The first is we're continuing to talk at the CEC around environmental and social equity metrics. And on Monday, we were fortunate enough to have the City of Oakland, Shayna Hirschfield, she's the Oakland Climate Coordinator, come in and talk with us about the work that the City of Oakland has been doing and has done over the past 3 years for their Environmental Climate Action Plan, ECAP. And so there's been just a lot of time and effort and public input for that effort. And we were wanting to hear about it more. So when we start talking about specific metrics for EBCE programs, we don't have to reinvent everything, but we can kind of build on the work that happened there. So we had that presentation to us on Monday. The other thing is, as you know, we've got several new people coming on board. And again, thank everybody for that. But because of that, we're going to push our voting of the chair and vice chair a few months. So I will be with you guys for a little bit longer, but we wanted to give the new people time to settle in before we say, hey, do you want to be chair or vice chair? So we're probably going to push that to September or October. Since we're dark in August anyway, that's another 2 months, maybe 3. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. As always, thank you for chairing the Community Advisory Committee and for all the members who are on it. And in a few minutes, we'll hear about new members who are joining that committee. Thank you for that. Colleagues, any questions of Mary Sutter, our CAC chair? And also, Mr. Clerk, are there any members of the public who are wishing to comment on this agenda item?
There's no one signed up to speak to this item.
Okay, not seeing any hands raised. Also not seeing any hands raised here. So we're going to move on to our next agenda item, and that's our prepaid transaction overview. And today, this is an informational item.
Good evening. My name is Howard Chang. I'm going to present on this item. Item 14 is an informational item related to the energy prepaid transaction. As a quick sort of refresher, this is a topic and a structure that we've presented to the board on a few occasions now, a few times related to getting approval on a variety of sort of outside legal counsel and consultants related to the transaction. And then we've separately just, as well as the approval of the recent JPA of the issuance conduit. And then we've presented on the structure itself, most recently to the Finance and Procurement Subcommittee. So this presentation really is a duplication of that presentation. So apologies in advance for some of the repetition here, but was informed by previous board members, given the complexity of this topic, the more kind of repetitions with it, the better. So with that as the backdrop, Adrian, if you can jump to the next slide. I have about 10 slides to cover here, and it is a little bit of a dense topic as a heads up, but I'll try to be efficient with it. The energy prepayment transaction is a long-term, non-recourse financial transaction that is between a tax-exempt load-serving entity. So in this case, EBCE or other CCAs would serve as that tax-exempt load-serving entity, and a taxable financial counterparty, which is called the prepay supplier in this case. And it utilizes the municipal bond market. I think a typical bond notional size is in the $600 to $800 million range. And really the goal of this is a load-serving entity such as ourselves would utilize the prepay really in order to lower our customer energy costs. Municipal utilities have used this type of a structure in the past for natural gas. It's been done for decades and quite a number of transactions, so it is a fairly well-tread path, but it is a sort of somewhat of a newer application towards power, specifically renewables, PPAs, and other source-specified power contracts, but really utilizes the same concepts and structure as gas prepays. And it's all codified in U.S. tax law, the ability and the allowance of being able to structure a transaction in this manner. Adrian, next slide, please. So a typical term of this type of transaction is 30 years. That's found to be the sort of optimal term in order to maximize the discount that we can get through this type of a transaction. And it gets repriced every 5 to 7 years. That's really based off of the optimal actual bond duration for what to go out to market for. The transacting parties, as I've referenced already, is typically a tax-exempt load-serving entity, in this case EBCE, and then a taxable financial counterparty. Right now, we are working specifically with Morgan Stanley as the prepay supplier, but there are other financial counterparties out there that provide this as well. And the process in a nutshell is that a prepay supplier is assigned an existing energy supply contract. So EBC has a number of energy supply contracts, of course, in place. We would actually assign an existing contract that we have and assign it into the prepay supplier. And then municipal bonds are issued that amount to the combined notional value of the assigned contracts that we've provided into the structure. And the prepay supplier then really pays the PPA seller, the original PPA seller. And electricity and attributes are transferred really from the original PPA seller to the prepay supplier, and then the prepay supplier to, in this case, EBCE, of course, And so it really just kind of creates an additional sort of pathway, but really all of the same electricity attributes are transferred through. And then we, as the load serving entity, we pay the prepay supplier, in this case, at a discounted rate, which allows us to achieve those procurement cost savings that I referenced. I think the key takeaway is the prepay supplier is effectively the energy supplier and is prepaid for the future energy deliveries, and hence that's what we are raising capital for. And the prepay supplier holds and utilizes that capital, and therefore then provides a discount to the prepay buyer, EBCE, that is really enabled through the spread between the taxable and the tax-exempt borrowing costs. The benefits are really to lower energy procurement costs. Savings over a 30-year term are estimated in the 5 to 15% range. And that's compared to sort of spot market purchases in our current contracts. And then that discount is subject to some fluctuation variation over the life of that 30-year term based off of those repricing periods. And then some of the key risks to highlight, and we'll touch on these in a little bit more detail, are regulatory risk, ensuring that they still satisfy all the same RPS requirements, SB 350, which is the long-term contracting requirement, the emissions performance standard, those types of items. Those are items that we feel that we have, sort of properly diligenced and de-risked, but nonetheless are items that are worth flagging here. Adrian, you can move on to the next slide, please. The parties involved, and there are quite a number here, as you can see. In our case, we are planning to do a joint prepaid transaction with Silicon Valley Clean Energy, sort of a sister CCA. We issued the RFP for services jointly since the initiation of this process. I think the reason to really do that is because this is a relatively new transaction amongst CCAs. We felt that working with another co-CCA, we could limit the notionals that we are going out to market for, and also just have more diligent support as we're evaluating a new sort of a structure and transaction type. The council that we have selected previously through solicitation and received board approval on are Orrick, Harrington, and Sutcliffe for bond and tax counsel, and Chapman and Cutler as our disclosure and issuers counsel. The prepay supplier, as I already noted, is Morgan Stanley. They were selected through a solicitation that was issued all the way back in November of 2019. So we have been at this process for some time. The municipal financial advisor we selected was also through solicitation, that is PFM, and that's a counterparty we've used in other circumstances. And then lastly, the bond issuance conduit is the California Community Choice Financing Authority, and that's something that we had as an action item previously with the board and approved the formation of that JPA, where EBCE is one of the 4 founding members. At this stage, actually, that note is a little bit stale. At this stage, all 4 founding CCA members have approved that JPA. Next slide, please. So a little bit more detail on the power contract assignment, since these are the long-term PPAs generally that we have signed and received approval on to date, and other sort of source specified contracts that we are allowed to assign in this type of a transaction. Just wanted to touch on the mechanics there. The existing renewables and power PPAs that we have signed are assigned, that we've executed are assigned into this taxable prepay transaction. The LSC continues, in this case, CCA, EBCE continues to take and pay for the energy and attributes that are currently agreed to in our PPA. So that structure does not change. Our solar, our wind contracts that we've already agreed to, the terms of those agreements are unchanged. The assignment is really a limited assignment of rights and liabilities that are associated with that, and then the energy product that kind of flows through this prepaid transaction structure, and then right back into EBCE, where otherwise it would have been directly delivered to EBCE. And if the prepaid program does terminate for some reason, if the prepaid supplier fails, if EBCE fails, then really the load serving entity forgoes the future savings, but the assigned PPA contract gets put right back to EBCE. So there really are no material changes to the existing power purchase agreements that we have in place. A couple notes on the debt aspect here. This debt is non-recourse. That of course is a critical aspect of this. None of this debt is recourse to EBCE or our members or the issuance conduit, the JPA itself. The debt is recourse to the prepay supplier in this instance. Lastly, this is an off-balance sheet debt transaction, so it does not flow to EBCE onto our balance sheet, which is again a critical aspect of how we've structured this. Next slide, please, Adrian. So a little bit more on the sizing aspects and the discount. The total bond notional could be as high as 1.5 billion. That's been identified for us by Morgan Stanley. I would say that's an outside sort of size. That's sort of really the largest size that they feel like is practical. As I noted earlier, I think the expected notional is in the $600 to $800 million range, so about half that size. That really gets determined when going out to market with the actual bonds. It is the California market, so there's a good deal of appetite for bond investors in California, specifically for this type of a green bond. So it could be above that size, and I think we would pursue that in order to optimize our savings. But that sort of gives you sort of a general sense of the likely range. The way this is established is that you really look at the 30-year life of the prepay power supply contract, and then you do a present value of that to arrive at that sort of $600, $800 million bond raise. And what that really equates to on an annual basis is roughly $12 to $16 million for annual procurement costs. And that 12 to 16 is reflective of that $600 to $800 million bond notional range. The estimated discount is about 10% that we can achieve through this transaction. Of course, that is determined by the sort of the market rates at the time that this is exactly executed. But that would therefore equate to about $1.2 to $1.6 million of annual savings by sort of having that power go through this type of a transaction. The transaction assumes an increase of cash flows over the life of the 30-year transaction. So on the initial year, it's $12 to $16 million of annual procurement costs. At the tail end of the transaction, it would increase to $20 to $25 million in annual procurement costs. As the transaction moves forward, the arbitrage value actually goes down over the life of the transaction. And that is simply a result of the present value benefits that you get through something like this obviously diminish because the remaining life of the transaction goes from 30 years to something shorter than that. As I've noted before, right now, the optimal sort of repricing period is 5 to 7 years. And so, that is subject to some change based off of bond market conditions, but that's what's sort of viewed right now. And then last sub-bullet there is a negotiated minimum discount rate. That is something that is currently under negotiation, but is established in the agreements with the prepay supplier. And to the extent we're not hitting that minimum discount, we as a counterparty have a right to walk away from that. Ultimately, the spread is established. The discount is established by the spread between the taxable and tax-exempt rates. And then they deduct out any transaction-related costs, the fees related to counsel that I highlighted, bond underwriting, tax counsel or financial advisors, the swap counterparty. So there are a variety of parties that are involved in this. The 10% estimated discount that I noted is sort of the net resulting discount that we estimate. So that accounts for all of the various fees that are associated with this type of transaction. And those fees are done on a contingent basis, assuming that there's successful execution of this overall structure. I think I touched on this last bullet, but the 5 to 7 years is sort of determined to be the optimal bond spread. When you recycle that and reprice that every 5 to 7 years over a 30-year life, that actually optimizes the actual discount that we're able to achieve. Next slide, please, Adrian. Some of the key documents associated with this, and there are quite a number of documents, so just touching on probably the most critical ones. There's the prepaid agreement, and really that details all of the flow of the power and payments between the parties. The actual counterparties there are the prepay supplier, so the financial institution, and then the conduit issuer. So that's the JPA that we recently received approval for. And it kind of lines out all the scenarios in which the deal might terminate early. It has very similar terms as the power supply contract, which is that third set of documents that I've highlighted here. The power supply contract really mirrors that prepay agreement, and the power supply contract is one of two documents that EBCE is actually a party to, and it is between EBCE and our JPA, so the issuance conduit. So the prepaid agreement is between the prepay supplier and the issuance conduit, and the power supply agreement then is between the issuance conduit and EBCE. So that's sort of how it's lined up. The repricing agreement, that second document that we have highlighted here, that really details the repricing process that I mentioned that happens every 5 to 7 years. So because there is a reissuance of the bonds every 5 to 7 years, there's some mechanics and protocols that are established related to how that bond remarketing happens and the time frame that that takes place. In each of those remarketing periods, that's when that discount rate gets reset based off of the existing market conditions at the time. There's also a letter agreement that's in place between the CCAs and the JPA itself. So again, this is the other of the two documents that EBCE actually signs, and this just kind of lays out the responsibilities that EBCE actually has related to taking action and necessary approvals, where the JPA is actually the counterparty to many of the contracts. That allows EBCE to actually have the authority to sort of make decisions on behalf of the JPA. And then the last set of documents is related to the commodity swap documents, and this is really primarily fixed to floating documents that allow us to have fixed price throughout the transaction for the 30 years. Adrian, next slide, please. This is kind of a basic boxes and arrows. We've showed this to the board on previous occasion, so it may look familiar. There have been no material changes to kind of what we've outlined here. On the top right, we have the load serving entity, or the CCA, so that's where EBCE sits. And typically we have a PPA, as you can see, sort of a dotted line going down that we have in place. And we've now, through this structure, we would assign that PPA over the prepay supplier on the left side. So that's where Morgan Stanley is represented. And then the PPA supplier really provides power and all associated attributes to the prepay supplier. That supplier pays the original prepay seller. And then in the middle, you have the municipal conduit. So that's the JPA that I spoke about. And really that's where all the power and attributes flow through the conduit and back to EBCE. So instead of having a direct delivery from the PPA to EBCE, it kind of flows through in a roundabout way. And then, of course, there is a non-recourse tax-exempt bond raise that the municipal conduit actually puts out there. Next slide, Adrian. A few more slides to go here. Touching on the benefits here, already I've mentioned this, of course, but the key benefit is a savings over the life of this transaction. So savings over the 30-year term of this, estimated in that 5 to 15% range, really dependent on discount rates or debt issuance rates at the time that this is repriced in the subsequent periods. EBCE can continue to enter into similar types of transactions in the future. I think the idea is, while there's some meaningful savings from this transaction that we identified in that sort of $1.2 to $1.6 million range. Obviously, that's fairly small relative to our overall energy budget. I think the idea here is, assuming this initial transaction goes smoothly and the board is comfortable with it, we can envision ourselves doing more of these exact types of transactions in the future. So, we could do 5 to 10 more prepaid transactions in the exact same format, and then you can get more meaningful savings through that in the $10 to $20 million range. We have certainly seen from other load serving, tax-exempt load serving entities that have historically utilized gas prepays. There's a wide range of how much gas those counterparties typically flow through a transaction like this. It can be half of or more of the overall energy costs, gas costs in that case. But for us, it could be energy costs. So we could really increase this and get much more meaningful savings through this process. I think that third bullet really we've touched on in terms of favorable risk allocation. It's really we're paying for the energy that's delivered, so there's no change in sort of the take or pay prepay PPAs that we have in place. The debt is non-recourse. Rating agencies have gotten very comfortable with comparable deals that other California specific entities and certainly nationwide entities have done, such as SMUD and SCAPA. Next slide, Adrian. On risks, the first risk is certainly that we spend quite a bit of time, staff time, on this type of transaction already, just diligencing, evaluating, negotiating it since we've started this process. Fortunately, a lot of the fees are on contingent basis, as I noted. So if for some reason over the course of the next few months, this transaction cannot move forward, if the board is not comfortable with it, if market conditions are not ripe, the dollars that are sort of sunk in this process are fairly minimal in the 25 to 50K range related to some outside counsel fees and advisory fees, and certainly staff time that has been committed to this already. Outside of that, if we do move forward with the transaction, some of the key risks are opportunity costs. Over a 30-year life, if there is some change to tax codes and there are better prepaid transactions out there that can be structured in a different manner, there's an opportunity cost of maybe getting higher savings through a different mousetrap, so to speak. That is unfortunately unavoidable to some extent. I think the way you mitigate that is that we have a lot of energy costs that we can flow through this type of a transaction. And so, really there's, just more opportunity to do that better transaction in the future if that were to come about. Regulatory risk, I did touch on this earlier. Right now we envision our long-term PPAs to satisfy our RPS obligations, to satisfy our SB 350 obligations. There is some risk that if you were to flow it through a vehicle like this and have it flow back, and we were to assign a PPA back and forth, that there would be some disruption to that SB 350, obligation. We have met with the CPUC. We feel like that risk is mitigated and we've addressed that, but you can never say that there's no risk associated with that upon additional CPUC diligence. I think it's a well mitigated risk, but wanted to highlight that here. And then the last one I would just note is general political risk, right? I mean, this is a tax exempt sort of municipal bond raise. If for some reason that there's a change in tax codes, counterparty was non-compliance to it, the deal has to collapse. There's not a financial risk to us in that case. Really, that financial risk is borne by Morgan Stanley, but there could be some political risk that we would be uncomfortable with. Again, I think that it's very small risk, but wanted to highlight that here. Next slide, please. So a bit on the timeline. We've already gone through the early stages of this. We're now in the late stages of document negotiation and preparation. Envision that to be done in the next 1 to 2 months. My hope is that we can bring forth an item in the June board meeting to actually seek an action item and explicit approval from the board to be able to move forward with this transaction. Again, assuming that the board is comfortable with it. And that would then allow us to be prepared for if markets are ready. We can go out and do that bond raise so that we don't miss sort of a window of time for the bond markets. We envision that to be sometime in the next 3 to 6 months. I'll note that markets have been shut off. Obviously, we've been in a recessionary environment here over the last year due to COVID. So markets have not been open for this type of transaction of late. But actually, very recently, just over the last month or so, there have been transactions, pricing, bond markets have opened back up. So I think now is a good time to close out the diligence process here and be ready and fully enabled to actually go to bond markets and issue bonds. Factors that still may impact timing, and while transactions have priced recently, things can certainly close up. So these things are very fluid and hard to predict exactly where rates will be when we're ready to go. But our ability to execute this has to do with spreads between the taxable and tax exempt debt costs. So very dependent on that. And again, markets can be very relatively fluid. Another factor that can impact timing is assignment of consent, assignment consents for our existing PPAs. We do have to get agreement from counterparties to be able to sign our power purchase agreements through this type of a transaction. there are different types of transactions we can put through this, renewables transactions, large hydro source specified transactions. So, I think this is, this is something that is manageable, but, can have an impact on timing of when we execute this transaction. Last slide, Adrian. These are just a few tidbits that we've previously showed to the board, so kind of recycled this slide, but just to highlight, this is a pretty tried and true structure. There have been 90+ municipal transactions of this nature. Most of those are gas prepays, as I noted. They represent $50+ billion of combined notional. That is nationwide. In California specifically, we have seen a number of transactions like this as well. 11 transactions, almost $6 billion of notionals, and those have been with well-known municipal entities such as SMUD and SCAPA, as I already noted. In terms of financial institutions that provide this transaction, there's a handful here: Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, RBC, Citi, TD Securities. Again, we did an RFP when we selected Morgan Stanley. We have seen additional financial institutions in the past that have been active in this market. So this could certainly change and increase over the years. And again, I think the last point we've touched on, this has primarily been with natural gas, but now we're looking to apply the same benefits here to our power purchase agreements. Again, apologize. I know that was a lot of information, a lot of dense material, but that was the extent of this presentation, and I will take any questions.
Thank you, Howard. Colleagues, while you're thinking about questions, I'm going to ask our clerk if there are any members of the public who have any any questions or comments from our attendees on this item.
There is no one currently signed up to speak to this item.
Okay, and I'm not seeing any hand raised in the attendee queue, so we'll go back to our panelists, and I see Councilmember Lopez.
Yeah, thank you very much for this presentation. I'm just going to work backwards here on the slide. So my basic 3 questions. The first one is in regards to you saying that this mostly is happening in the gas market. How many of these transactions have actually occurred with CCAs here in California?
None have been executed to date. We are jointly doing with Silicon Valley, as I noted. MCE is in the process as well. I would say they're a little further along with us, and they are working with a different counterparty than we are. But a lot of the same advisors. So we would be, we may actually price it, assuming we move forward, we'd probably price after MCE. And so they would probably execute first, and we would probably at the time be the second one, but to date, none.
None, thank you very much. And then also, so here on slide 11, you talk about that the spread needs to be meaningful between the taxable and tax exempt, markets. Can you divulge what that spread needs to look like for this to be, viable?
Yeah, so, viability, I think, really is about how much discount we want to achieve. I think we are targeting about a 10% discount. And I would say order of magnitude wise, I'm going off of memory, but I believe it's about a 0.5% spread between taxable and tax exempt rates. So, that is meaningful, but, if you're not familiar with, municipal bond markets, certainly spreads can be above that. So achievable, I think.
So a 0.5 point spread would be where you would look to go ahead and execute it if we're ready with all the paperwork, and that's what you're saying.
That's right. Yeah, and certainly if it was greater than that, that would be beneficial. We'd love to see that. Yeah. I think right now, based off where markets are at, we feel like that is realistic and achievable, and still giving us meaningful, translating to a meaningful discount.
And what are projections looking like for that?
Projections of
well, analysts will project out, like what the rates will be.
Yeah, so I guess 2 factors. If you ask our financial advisors, they're very hesitant to say this is where rates will go. It's very difficult to predict where interest rates will go in the future. And it might give indications directionally as to whether markets are opening up. Interest rates are expected to increase. So I think directionally, our advisors have said, you know, we want to be enabled and be ready when markets do open up, because directionally interest rates are increasing, and an increase in interest rates likely leads to a larger spread, typically. And so that's one factor. The other factor is, as I noted, there has been a recent transaction that has price in the market. So that is, you know, that is achievable right now from their perspective to get that sort of 10%-ish target discount. But there are, of course, you know, there's volatility, there's fluctuations in the market on an ongoing basis, and that was in a different part of the country. So it wasn't the California specific bond market that price. So it's a proxy, but not perfect.
Okay, so that was a follow-up to my second question. So my third question here is on slide 6 about the repricing and a reissuance of bonds every 5 to 7 years. Can you expand a little bit there and talk about what that could potentially mean to us tangibly, or what the risk would be associated there, or any risk at all?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's basically, in that 5 to 7 year period, they would reissue bonds. Obviously, the bonds that we go out from day one, call it, let's just say it's $600 million. Over, you know, five to 7 years from now, there would be some amount of that would amortize. So it would be a lower volume, call it $550 million. They would go back out to market, and, you know, obviously we would see where the tax-exempt bond markets are at that time and where the taxable market is at that time. That spread would then determine the discount rate for that next, you know, 5 to 7 year period. And, you know, to the extent, you know, that interest rates increase and the spread is greater, then the discount can be greater. And of course, if the spread is less, then our discount is at risk of being lower as well. Two mitigating factors to that risk are, if we don't meet a minimum discount, we have a right to walk away from the transaction, so we're not locked in. And that spread wouldn't go negative. So, you know, we're not at risk of like paying money in this transaction because of that minimum discount aspect.
Okay, so I guess we would just want the spread to be better in 5 to 7 years, and if not, then we can, like you said, we can walk away.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I see no other hands raised, colleagues, and this is a information report. So thank you, Howard, for that. And if and when this comes back to us, we'll for a vote, if need be, we'll may have a few more questions then. Colleagues, let's go on to the next item, and this is our legislative update, and this is an action item.
Great. Good afternoon or evening. So today I wanted to bring before you a approval for a position on Senate Bill 68, which is sponsored or authored by Becker. Adrian, maybe you can move to the next slide, please. I also wanted to give you an update on SB 612, which is the CalCCA sponsored bill, and then a quick update on the bills that EBCE is supporting. Next slide, please. So a quick update on SB 612. It was amended on April 26 in accordance with some committee recommendations that enabled it to get out of the Senate Energy, Utilities and Communications Committee. The vote was 11-1, which was really positive. But some key opposition included 2 of the utilities, PG&E and SCE, as well as TURN and Q, which is a coalition of utility employees. A few of the members that voted yes did indicate some concerns about the bill and/or about CCAs more generally. And so at this point, the bill is in appropriations, and it is awaiting a committee hearing tomorrow. So we are hopeful that it will pass out of appropriations tomorrow and head to the Senate floor. It's on the suspense file, more specifically. And so after that hearing, we will hear whether or not it has moved forward. Given that Senator Portantino is the chair of appropriations, we're expecting that it will pass. And then the next hurdle is passing off of the Senate floor and over to the Assembly. So we continue to work very closely with CalCCA And we are thankful for our cities who've sent in support letters, and for those that have not, would encourage you to please do so. I'm also in the process of meeting individually with each of our member jurisdictions, our ledge folks, so that we can just connect on strategy. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so SB 68 is the bill that I was bringing forward today with a recommendation of taking a support position. The bill essentially does three different things. For start, it would require the CEC in consultation with a number of other state agencies to develop a guide for overcoming barriers to electrification of buildings, as well as installation of EV charging equipment. It would also authorize the CEC, when it implements its EPIC, or Electric Program Investment Charge Grant Program, to also award funds for projects that reduce the costs of building electrification. And that could include by reducing or avoiding the costs of expanding electrical service and electrical panel upgrades for existing buildings. Electrical panel upgrades can be quite a substantial cost when one is trying to electrify a building. In addition, the bill would require the CPUC to specify some reasonable timeframes for when an investor-owned utility has to complete a requested electrical service upgrade. The investor-owned utility would have to publish those timeframes on its website, and it would also have to report annually to the CPUC on how it is doing in meeting those timeframes. Furthermore, if the investor-owned utility doesn't meet the timeframe established by the CPUC, it would have to report back to the PUC as well as to the building owner with reasons for the failure and the expected completion date. So this is expected to just shed some transparency on the process of electrical service upgrades and hopefully improve the timing of it as well. So overall, we think that SB 68 aligns well with our principle of accelerating decarbonization, since it's really designed to enable much deeper building decarbonization through supporting increased electrification, as well as addressing some of those costs. And then it will also support by enabling the electrical service upgrades that are needed to electrify our buildings. So, so this one, we would recommend a support position. Next slide, please. I'll just go really quick through these. I think the takeaway here is that many of the bills that we have taken positions on are at either the Assembly or the Senate Appropriations Committee. Most of them are on the suspense files of those respective committees. And the suspense hearings are happening tomorrow. So we will have more updates on how these bills have fared at that point. So stay tuned, and we will keep you updated as we learn more. All of the bills have to pass their House of Origin by Friday, June 4th. If they do not, then they would not be eligible for any more actions until the following January. This is the first year of the 2-year legislative cycle. So essentially, if they don't get acted on by June 4th, they become a 2-year bill. And one more slide, I believe, shows the Senate bill positions as well. So you have those to take a look at. But as I said, these are also mostly in the Senate appropriations suspense at the moment. So, so that is the end of the slides. I think I would also just mention on top that we've received the budget May revision recently. The governor proposed $2 billion to cover unpaid water and electricity utility debt that is accumulated during the pandemic. We are working very closely with the relevant folks to ensure that any money that does end up getting allocated by the legislature is equitably distributed to all those serving entities, so that we can ensure that all of our customers are receiving any debt relief that they may decide to issue. The legislature also, of course, has their own plans for the budget. And so we will see what they come up with as well. And we're following the Senate and Assembly budget hearings. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Melissa. Thank you for all your work on these bills. Colleagues, I'd like to go in this order. First, I'd like to entertain a motion and possible discussion on SB 68, which is the one action item we have being asked of us today. And I think this is what I and others brought forward last month, so I hope we do support it. And then after that motion, then if there are questions about any of the bills that are on the list, on the Assembly or the Senate list that we're already supporting, if anybody has any questions of those, we'll entertain those questions. And then finally, we'll go to any new bills that any of us might want to put forward to have the staff look at within the next few weeks. So that said, I'd like to start with SB 68. Is there any questions or a motion? I see Councilmember Harrison with her hand raised.
Yeah, I'd like to move approval of support for SB 68.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Councilmember Mayor Martinez. And I do, before we take any vote, we do need to have the public speakers. So looking forward to hearing the public commenters. Mr. Clerk?
Yes, we have two speakers, Barbara Stebbins and Jada Dogan. I am unmuting Barbara Stebbins now. So 1 second, I just need to find.
Okay, Barbara Stebbins here for both Local Clean Energy Alliance and the California Alliance for Community Energy. I'm here today to urge the EBCE board to take position in opposition to AB 1139. You heard a number of speakers in public comment mention this bill as well. The advocacy that East Bay Clean Power Alliance and others that established EBCE was driven by the vision of a public agency that would develop clean, resilient, equitable, local energy in East Bay communities. Our advocacy was driven by the potential environmental, social, economic, and economic benefits that such development could bring. All of that we envisioned is dependent on rooftop solar. AB 1139 will result in a collapse of the rooftop solar industry in California, as happened in Nevada in 2015. That resulted in them actually repealing that bill in 2017 because it was so damaging to rooftop solar in that state. There's similar bills. They will have similar results. We urge EBCE to get involved. We need community choice involved in stopping this bill. Otherwise, any plans around resilience, all of the things around microgrids, resilience hubs, critical facilities even, they will suddenly become way more expensive than they were before. They will just, for individual people, they will become, rooftop solar will become out of reach. It will become so, the SOMA, those who implement the SOMA program that puts solar on multifamily affordable units, they called in to oppose this bill because they know how devastating it will be.
Thank you, Barbara.
Okay.
Thank you.
Jada, you are unmuted.
Catherine. Hi, Jada Dogan with the Local Clean Energy Alliance. Barbara already said all the things that I wanted to say, but I want to ask why EBC doesn't oppose AB 1139. You heard from the public about resilience hubs tonight, and this bill will kill rooftop solar if you don't do anything about it. And rooftop solar is an important component of resilience hubs. So I think EBC should say no to AB 1139. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm seeing one more hand raised for this item.
Great. I am unmuting Audrey Ichinose now.
Thank you. I just I want to just ask Melissa if she can give us any insight into where Cal CCA stands on this. I'm sure it has come up, and Is CalCCA divided? Are its members of two minds? Can you please give us some idea of what's going on? Thank you.
Thank you all to our public commenters. Appreciate it so very much. I'm sorry, Mr. Clerk?
We have one more speaker signed up.
Oh, my apologies. Go ahead.
I am unmuting Jessica Tovar now.
I just wanted to add that this issue is a direct attack on rooftop solar net energy metering incentive. And it really is about PG&E and the other utilities really solidifying their monopoly and keeping us attached to their transmission infrastructure, of which that they nickel and dime us in our bills. One of our line items in our bills is transmission costs amongst all the various other costs. So really taking a stand against AB 1139 is really important from our community choice program, because if we're serious about building a local clean energy economy and assets, then we need to oppose the direct attacks from the utilities on community choice and on aspects that would hinder the ability of community choice programs to improve their communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, colleagues, we have a motion and a second on SB 68. So let's vote on that, and then we could have any brief questions or comments on the other bills. Mr. Clerk.
Yes. So we have a motion and a second. I'm going to call the roll. Alameda County. Albany.
Yes.
Berkeley.
Yes.
Dublin.
Yes.
Fremont.
Yes.
Okay. Hayward.
Yes.
Hayward.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes, I did.
Okay, thank you.
Livermore.
Yes.
Newark.
Aye.
Piedmont.
Yes.
Pleasanton.
Yes. Excuse me. Yes.
San Leandro.
Aye.
Tracy.
Yes.
Union City.
Yes.
Emeryville.
Yes.
And Oakland.
Aye.
The measure passes.
Okay, thank you so very much. And staff will communicate to the author and appropriate committees of our support for that bill. Of the charts that are in the packet on the Assembly and the Senate bills that are already, where we already have positions, does anybody on the board have any questions or comments on any of those bills before we get to any brand new bills? I'm seeing, Kate, is that your hand up?
It is. I had a question about what changes we asked for in AB 1087.
I was going to ask the very same question.
Because I saw they were rejected. What
yes.
did we ask for, and what was the rationale for not accepting them?
Nick or Melissa?
Sure, happy to answer. So we had asked if CCAs could be one of the administrators for the Resilience Hub funding, in part because the original bill had asked that the utilities and/or third-party administrators do that, and we felt that this would be a convoluted process that would make it would take much longer to get that grant funding actually deployed. So I think the authors or the sponsors certainly talked about it, thought about it. They did take the investor and utilities out of the mix. So now they have it solely being run by third-party administrators overseen by the CPUC. We still think that this will slow down getting the funds out the door, but I would say that we wanted to see how the bill evolved and see the amendments in print. Presumably we could get to yes on this bill.
Yeah, I would hope we would, because we're in support of this general idea, even if we don't like the exact mechanism. And I think it's kind of contrary to our general policy to be against it. We should keep trying to work on that, but I would not be in favor of continuing to request amendments. The principle is more important. Thank you.
I'll just add, since the question came up, first, the City Council of Oakland has officially endorsed the bill, just to let you know. And if the new set of amendments, would Cal CCA be eligible to apply to be one of those third-party administrators?
No.
No, they couldn't. It has to be like a nonprofit organization or some company.
It would be a trade association. So a trade association couldn't administer it. You'd have to have, I don't know, Melissa, do they define it further than that? But Cal CCA can do it.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think that they would be eligible, but I would have to look at the language a little bit more closely. I mean, I would say, however, if the board wants to move from support if amended to support, we could do that today.
I'd like to make a motion that we move to support.
Okay, I'm happy to second that motion. I'm also happy to take any other comments and questions from our colleagues here on the board. Seeing no other hands raised. Mr. Clerk, let's call the roll on this motion.
Yes. This motion is to support. Can you repeat the motion, please?
If I understand correctly, is to go from a support, if amended, to a full support of AB 1087 by Assemblymember David Chu. And since that bill is on our chart, we can indeed vote today to do that.
Great. And my apologies, the first and the second on this again?
Harrison is the first and the chair is the second.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay.
Could you give us a little bit of a background on this one? Because in your meeting notes, I only see the AB 68.
Sure. Thank you, Councilmember Cox. Let's see. Melissa, could you just give a quick summary of the bill as you remember it?
Yeah, sure. So the bill, it would essentially reallocate funding from the California Climate Credit to a new streamlined grant program that would fund climate resiliency improvements to buildings that would constitute community hubs. So right now, every account gets a California Climate Credit, and instead of getting that credit on one's bill, those funds would be reallocated. Customers would be able to opt out of that reallocation. But if they don't take action, then those funds would no longer flow directly to the customers of credit.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. I appreciate asking the question. Any other questions or comments on this bill? We did get a brief briefing on this bill a couple months ago. And Kate, is your hand still up?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay, then I'm going to ask our clerk to call the roll on this motion.
Great. Can we repeat the motion one more time?
Sure. The motion is to go from the current position of support if amended to a position of support on AB 1087 by David Chu.
Great. Thank you. Alameda County. Albany.
Yes.
Berkeley.
Yes.
Dublin.
Yes.
Fremont.
Yes.
Hayward.
Yes.
Livermore.
Yes.
Newark.
Aye.
Piedmont.
Yes.
Pleasanton.
Yes.
San Leandro.
Aye.
Tracy.
Yes.
Union City.
Yes.
Emeryville.
Yes.
And Oakland.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. So now is the opportunity to bring up any additional bills that that are not yet on our list or haven't yet considered. And I'm going to start that. There's a bill, SB 617. We can't vote on any new bills today if they're not in our agenda anywhere at all. but we can direct our staff to bring these bills back to our next meeting to take a formal position. And I'd like to suggest that SB 617, which is, for lack of a better word, a streamlining bill to help the solar industry, rooftop solar. It's received a lot of support, and I'd like us to come back to our next board meeting with a staff report, a brief staff report, so we can take a support position or any other position on that bill at our next meeting. And that's SB 617 by Scott Wiener. And I'm looking for hands raised. I see Councilmember Kick.
Would you like to do each bill individually, or should I bring up one that I was hoping we could?
Now's the time that we don't need a second on these, although people can share their views. If there are other people support the same bills, it's always good to hear that, so our staff hears that. But this is just general direction to our staff to come back next meeting.
Okay, great. So I will unofficially second your SB 617, and then I would like to have an opposed position of AB 1139.
Okay, so
to bring back information for us to potentially take an opposed position of 1139.
Okay, so there's a request to staff to, at our next meeting, to have an analysis of the policy and all the political machinations behind 1139, so the board can choose to take a position on that at our next board meeting in June. If the staff also wants to bring that on as an informational item to our executive committee meeting coming up next week, that's fine too, of course. Let's see, next is Councilmember Lopez and then Councilmember Hannan.
Thank you very much. So I ditto Councilmember Kick there. I'd like to see AB 1139 come back to the E-Board next week if possible. And then if there's enough time for staff to prepare some information on background on that, and then also see it at our next board meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilmember Hannan.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Unless time is of the essence, may I request that staff bring back a summary or an informational item summarizing both of these particular state items, and then have us vote the following meeting so that we have enough time to review and digest, and then see whether or not we want to support it. I'm always worried about trying to digest and then support something or oppose something the same night, unless timing's of the essence.
I appreciate that. I'll just give you my thought about that. A lot of the committees on these bills meet in mid to late June, and so if we wanted to weigh in, taking a position in our June meeting could be beneficial. Waiting till July, we've kind of missed the boat in terms of the committees. So I would respectfully suggest that we get information ahead of time sent to us, and then we actually try to give ourselves opportunity to actually vote on these bills at our June meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm okay with that. Would simply ask that staff, maybe that would be you, Melissa, if you'd be kind enough to send us links to those respective bills, maybe in the next couple of days, so we have an opportunity to review them in plenty of time prior to our next meeting. That would be my request. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Not seeing any other hands raised for new bills. Staff, you've heard requests on 2 bills to present an analysis, fact sheets and what have you, and to give us the opportunity to vote on those at our June board meeting. And then also an informational discussion on 1139 at our at next week's XCOM also was requested. We don't need a vote on that. Also, as an FYI, there's been a non-legislative but policy campaign around the state to push forward a ZEV, a kind of a ZEV mandate, zero emission vehicle mandate by 2030. I know a handful of cities and one community choice authority have already endorsed that with resolutions. And so I'm going to ask staff to work with me on bringing forward such a resolution to promote electric vehicles at at our next board meeting as well. And Mike, is your hand still up?
No, Mr. Chair, thank you.
Okay. All right. I don't think we need any more discussion on that. We have a couple big items to talk about coming up. So thank you for that. Melissa, again, thank you for your great work. Thank you, board members, for engaging in this discussion. And we're going to go on to the next agenda item. Oops. As soon as I get it up in front of me. And that is, excuse me, this is our partnership with Roots. We're bringing that back with some revisions, and I know that went to committee as well. So Nick, who's presenting on this? Annie?
Yep, that'll be me.
Excellent.
Okay, good evening, everyone. So we are revisiting this item that came to you last month. Adrian, if we could go ahead to the next slide. So we're hopefully not going to rehash too much of what we already went over, but we did make some updates, and we did, as Chair Call mentioned, go back to the marketing subcommittee for some additional feedback. And with that, they supported bringing this back to the full board for a vote tonight on whether or not we move forward with this sort of elevated partnership with the Roots. So next slide, please. Wanted to just start out with, I think, apologies for what felt like such a rush last month. I think, we were trying to meet certain deadlines, and, the Roots organization has been a good partner to us. I think they were also working on tight timelines, but in sort of our eagerness to move forward, I think we missed some of the context. And so I wanted to present a bit of that to you tonight. So why are we even looking for a partnership, some partnership? If we can go to the next slide, a little bit of background and context is, of course, initially in 2018, when we launched to our original JPA member areas, we were very focused on just standing up a new organization and bringing on 550,000 customers. So very basic things, like making sure that our billing engine worked. And then, of course, our customer notices, starting some brand awareness, and then lots of events. Since then, in 2019 and 2020, we really focused in on retention of those customers. So we did do some expanded sort of marketing and outreach through local sponsorships. We developed more of our social media accounts, content, personas, and then, of course, building our networks through your existing channels, but really connecting those to EBCE, and then ongoing brand building. And now in 2021, hopefully coming out of the pandemic, back to a time when we are more engaged as a society, and going forward, we're looking to go beyond that, to really engage with our customers and ask them to do things, to participate in programs, or to really provide information to them at this next critical, I'd say like 6 to 12 months around assistance programs. But we need them to know who we are and to engage with us in order to do that. So next slide, please. This next slide is just very high-level summary to sort of explain how we got to this point. So we were focused on enroll, then retain, and now we want to engage. And we have been doing that through a number of channels, but we're really looking to broaden that in what I think is honestly a very innovative way, especially for a CCA. Next slide, please. So what is part of our current marketing challenge? I'm going to pause for a second because I see there's a chat that says the slides aren't showing up. Is anyone else experiencing that?
I'm seeing them, but apparently someone is not. Councilmember Kick, are you not seeing the slides?
No, I'm not. But I don't know if it's really just me.
Adrian, could you unshare and then share again? Maybe that'll work.
Okay, I'm sharing them again now. Can you please confirm that you can see the slides?
I could see him.
Okay.
Okay, Annie.
All right. Thank you. Yeah. Hopefully, Director Kick is able to follow along. Luckily, she has seen much of this content before. She's a member of our marketing subcommittee. So what is our current marketing challenge? So we do have a growing brand awareness. We just completed a most recent survey in April that showed, roughly 6% increase over October, so just this past fall, increase in brand awareness, which is great, but that's still fairly low. So it's hard to ask people to take action when they're not aware of who we are yet and what services we provide. Okay, it looks like Councilmember Kick is back on, great. So we want to continue to increase our brand awareness. We know that we do have an urgent call to action related to utility debt. I will note here that JP's group, the programs group, through their portfolio of programs called Connected Communities, are fully focused on this more urgent call to action and including funds for CBO outreach as well as other mechanisms to get information and enrollment within our customers increased. So what we are looking to do is really work with trusted partners. And of course, there's a lot we're already doing for that, but we're looking to expand that again. So if we could go to the next slide. So we thought about how do we partner with a local organization or institute or company, and really with the idea of more of a consumer product. So this is going outside of the norm for local government, but we wanted to think, how are other companies, organizations sort of engaging with their customers and getting them to take action? And what our objective is to really expand our reach, to leverage that relationship, and to meet people where they are, which is currently, they're not really thinking about electricity. It's true. When we start to approach wildfire season and there are these potential shutoffs, people start to think about it a bit more. But studies have shown, as pointed out here, that people maybe spend, upwards of like 11 minutes engaging in their utilities every year. So we really want to sort of broaden our engagement with customers and drive participation in programs. So going on to the next slide, just wanted to share again so that this is in context, what we are currently doing and what we will continue to do, which is some of your more traditional or standard advertising, paid social media as well as organic, paid print and digital ads, streaming video ads. We have our own newsletter, and of course we're issuing press releases and getting earned media. We're doing direct mail and email campaigns around programs, not really doing that for general brand awareness. That's more targeted call to action. And then 3 times a year, we continue to do our sponsorship of local organizations that vary, anything from, STEM education to food and housing to sports to music to arts to education. Nick went over our most recent tranche of awardees during the CEO report. And then there are other monthly or maybe other regular content sharing networks. So your staff, your city staff has been great about helping us promote. I mean, I think nearly every city has, certainly you all have like general newsletters, but I think every city has some sort of like environmental or sustainability or resiliency newsletter. So it's a great way to get our information out. And we continue to build sort of what I think of as our network of community-based organizations. And they're not all necessarily social services. Like I said, it's also some of our hyper-local sponsorships. So they're youth sports groups or music groups or what have you. But these are organizations that are sort of embedded within their communities and have people that they touch and are communicating with. And so we send them regular monthly content to include in their newsletters. And then lastly, an existing channel is our local chambers of commerce. And that's really more focused on the small business. But again, a great existing channel that we're using. So on to the next slide, what options are out there? And this is pulling back again and saying, if we want to do a partnership to expand our reach, who are we thinking about? So on the next slide, I just tried to summarize a bit of our internal brainstorm with this word cloud. So again, thinking about a consumer product, we looked at local food brands, retail outlets, food outlets, wineries and breweries, some local services like you'll see East Bay Parks and Kaiser Permanente, sports teams like Roots, and we heard your feedback. You know, we went out and we looked at some sort of comps in that area, and then other local networks, you know, like the YMCA, PTAs, Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts. And then on the next slide, what we show is we sort of put this through our own filter of a best fit analysis. So we know that we want something on brand. So is this, you know, does this other brand, company, organization have a focus on sustainability? Do they have a focus on local community? And then do they have an ongoing network that would allow us to continue to engage with customers? And so as we thought through them, you can sort of see created this little Venn diagram bubble. And what landed in the middle were these 4 organizations. And we can go on to the next slide. So I have not, and based on the feedback from the marketing subcommittee, I have not pursued these further. But you know, just to let you know, these are my ideas about what a partnership might look like. How would we leverage that partnership? And then sort of representing some of the reach that these organizations could have. And these are not, you know, these numbers for social media are not necessarily specific to Alameda County and Tracy, but just sort of what these organizations represent in social reach. So going on to the next slide, wanted to, I don't have updated information on Oracle or the Coliseum or the Oakland A's. I have not received a response from the A's. Oracle, we talked to them back in 2019. That was when the Warriors were still there. So now, you know, the Oracle opportunity for that kind of like marquee sponsorship is really going to be about concerts and other events that they have. Came in around 150. We did speak with Cal Athletics, which is managed by a third party sort of private firm. And they pitched us on some ideas. And then we went back and we spoke to the Roots again. So all of the sort of promotional stuff I showed you before is still there, no longer on the jersey. But if we could go to the next slide, they provided us some other levels of sponsorship. And I think the one that really makes sense for us is $125K a year, where we would be the presenting sponsor of the kids zone. So it's sort of in the end zone at Laney College. It's where the kids go and there's free ice cream and lots of parents standing around having a beer while their kids play. So good opportunities to really engage with people, but also get our name up there. But we would, all of the other promotional stuff, the sort of in-game and on-field recognition, the social push, the commercials on television, and most importantly, really this partnership where we would be leveraging their different channels into the community to do outreach around climate, becoming climate positive or going beyond carbon neutral to being climate positive, but also to get critical information out on our programs and assistance to our customers. So I already sort of started talking about the next slide here, why Oakland Roots. We can go right on to the slide following that, Adrian. Next one. So we are currently a founding partner. They are very community-based. They are expanding their reach throughout the county and Tracy. You know, we worked with them. We know they're a good collaborative partner. You know, we produced with them 8,000 masks and distributed those in the sort of, you know, a few months after the pandemic initially hit. We partnered with them on a promotion called East Bay Daily Donation. You can see in this little clip I included that the A's also were part of this, but the A's did it because Oakland Roots got us access to A's, sort of pushed them. And East Bay Daily Donation was essentially after we ran our first solicitation for COVID relief funds, we got so many wonderful applications, but we couldn't fund them all. And we thought, wow, there is so much good work being done out there, so much critical work. How can we continue to sort of promote them and direct people to these organizations that could use their donation? And so that's what East Bay Daily Donation was. And the Roots were a strong supporter helping to promote that. And then most recently, and Nick mentioned this earlier, we just recently did an Earth Day video with the Roots. So you can see our Instagram, we got 245 views, that's great. The Roots got nearly 4,000. So they definitely would be expanding our reach, our brand awareness, and then ultimately helping us engage more with customers. The next slide is a bit of an eye chart. It's a lot of content about the other stuff that Roots is doing in the community. I do think it's a little unconventional to think of a sports team as being a community-based organization, but that I think is what really makes the Roots unique in many, many ways. And they're getting a lot of attention for that. And with us as their climate partner, that means more attention for us too, which means our customers know more about our programs and we get better participation. So we're on to the last slide, which is simply our staff recommendation, what we're asking for you to vote on tonight, which is authorization to enter into the 3-year agreement. And I just added in here that I recommend the board receive at least biannual reports on our partnership activities. I fully acknowledge that this is a large spend within the context of our marketing budget, but even for this year's marketing budget, we actually have enough to cover for this year. So we actually don't need any additional budget. For the next 21-22 budget, which is our next item on this meeting, this represents, I think, less than 8% of the total marketing budget. The total marketing budget is something like 0.3% of our overall budget. So it is a big spend. I'm acknowledging that from what we've done in the past, but it is not taking away from any of the work we'd be doing around connected communities. And I think is really an innovative way for us to engage with our customers and try and, be a little bit outside of the box and get people who never think about energy to think about energy. So with that, I will pause.
Annie, so the only additional point I want to make in reference to your comment about paying for in this fiscal year is because we have sufficient funds left in this FY's budget, we will not be seeking to pay for this program in this coming FY. So it is a 3-year program. The first year pay for occurs in this FY. In our coming budget, we would not expect to use marketing or partnership funds for this program. It would be in our next FY that we would pay for year 2. And I guess I just finally comment to make is, one of the points that was raised during the marketing committee was the importance of working with the Roots to deliver events outside of Oakland. And, that's absolutely something that we intend to be part of our agreement and part of this relationship is, bringing the Roots, bringing events, East County, South County, Tracy, all of our communities are going to see a tangible sort of presence and benefit, in your communities, and also, by opportunities to sort of engage with the team. Okay.
Did we lose our chair? Hey, well, I will be happy to take over. I'm going to lower my hand, and colleagues, indulge me. I'd like to hear from the public first before we get to any comments, unless you have a burning question that you'd like to ask. So of those of you who have your digital hands raised, if you want to give me a physical hand wave, if you really need to ask your question. Otherwise, let's go ahead and hear from the public, and I will delegate to our very capable clerk to go ahead and unmute the speakers in order. And I see
Very
we have
nice.
our chair back. So welcome back, Chair Kelp. We're just going to hear from public before we come back to the board.
Thank you.
Great. We have 4 speakers currently signed up. Jada Dogon, Barbara Stebbins, Audrey Ichinose, and Jean Wu. Jada Dogon, I'm unmuting you now.
Thank you. Hi, Jada again with the Local Clean Energy Alliance. Last month, after hearing from the public about the urgency around utility debt relief, the EBCE Board of Directors rejected the proposal to spend $900,000 over 3 years for the sponsorship. And we really applauded that decision. I know that this is a different proposal now, but you still have over 50,000 customers who have utility debt. So I'm hoping the board will do the same again this month and reject this proposal. Also, I have a question about this item. What is the total budget for sponsorship, and what is the percentage of the sponsorship compared to the total sponsorship budget? Thank you.
Thank you, Jada. I've unmuted Barbara Stebbins.
Barbara Stebbins, so with East Bay Clean Power Alliance, and Jada covered some of what I wanted to cover. I think mostly the proposal really strikes me as one that would be tailor-made for an organization like PG&E. They love to do these kinds of sponsorships where they get their name out and can call on these people later to do things that are very destructive to community choice, for instance. I think that there are, the real problem to me is that I know just from the work I do of how many community-based organizations are out there that are actually organized and whose mission is to help community people with issues like paying their utility bills. And I don't quite understand why some of those organizations can't become trusted community partners. So for instance, APEN, Asian Pacific Environmental Network, has very deep roots in the Asian community, probably throughout EBCE's territory, because I know their reach extends beyond Oakland. And I think that they would be much better, for instance, at getting word out about the AMP program, about CARE and FARA, and how to enroll for these assistance programs. At a time, and I'll just echo what Jada said, you know, when we have so many customers who can't pay their utility bills, $125,000 is actually just a little less than what's spent on Connected Communities. And Connected Communities was an example of a program that really was targeted toward achieving more equity in energy in the Bay Area. I'd like to see that 125 go to more programs like that that are really going to address the issues of frontline communities and other low-income communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. Audrey Ichinose, you are unmuted for 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. East Bay Clean Power Alliance and California Alliance for Community Energy. And I urge the board to reject this proposal again. I appreciate how difficult it is for EBCE to root itself in such a large service territory as diverse as ours. And I really honor the efforts of marketing to gather empirical feedback, you know, sort of, and tailoring its efforts and really trying to push the envelope in reaching out. And I also want to congratulate marketing for the low opt-out rate so far from the new communities. But I must confess that I felt really disheartened about EBC outreach after viewing the Earth Day video. It was so unclear to me about EBCE. I mean, it was so unclear, I think, for anyone watching about EBCE, what it's all about. The video had high production values, no doubt. But what did it say about EBC's commitment to building local green jobs or actually meeting some, you know, frontline workers as in like in Fruitvale? If it could have featured EBC involvement, for example, in helping the Roots franchise go green at its new headquarters in Fruitvale, maybe with plans to install a solar plus storage system to benefit the team's utility bill. Wow, that would have been really much more striking to me. The video reminds me of EBCE's central challenge, which is the need to distinguish itself clearly from the for-profit monopoly utility. To my mind, that means emphasizing all the things that PG&E is not: nonprofit, local control, transparency, rather than a slick production having the superficial feel of celebrity endorsements. I'm sorry, I'm going out of time, but maybe you can give me a few more seconds. We could have had promotional videos featuring EBCE board members talking about the special characteristics and needs of their constituencies. Dull stuff? I don't think so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We have Jessica Tovar. I'm unmuting you now.
Jessica Tovar, East Bay Clean Power Alliance, and I just want to echo again what I said earlier, is that we're voting on a 3-year commitment, large amount of money, and it really should be considered in the context of the rest of the budget, because we don't want to, you know, exacerbate the problem of having inequities of how we spend our money. And, you know, one thing I want to echo that was said earlier is we need to have, you know, huge investments and partnerships with community organizations and the needs of the folks of community people on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one more speaker, Jean Wu. Jean Wu, I'm unmuting you now.
Hi, thank you very much for this opportunity to speak. So I would like to echo some of the concerns of the other people. This is my first time to hear about this, and I find that to be an extraordinarily large amount of money, even though it may be a very good cause. What I'm thinking is that we could really support people in something like including a big push to support the People's Grocery, which provides food and education, including nutrition education, and helps people get good quality food, which is important for general health and growth and development. We could also support something like the People's Power Battery Collective, which is providing free batteries to people who need them when the power goes out, to keep the refrigerators going and their phones going. And it doesn't require any kind of commitment by anyone, but it provides free power as long as they're obligated to charge the batteries later and return them so other people can use them. It's an all-volunteer organization and should be spread much larger, because too many people have been negatively affected by the PSPS events. And this is, again, a place where EBCE could really thoroughly support the community in ways that our friends at the IOUs never do. And then the other one that's really important to me is that instead of actually promoting sports as a way for kids to get forward, we should actually be promoting STEM. And STEM activities like robotics, general science clubs, even chess clubs, anything that gets people moving forward in academics, so that in the future we have well-educated, highly educated, extremely motivated community members who can participate in more activities to develop our communities. I do think that there are other organizations that may be useful to you, and you need to look at them.
Okay. All the public speakers?
There's no one else signed up for public comment on this item.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you all for the comment on this item. We have a number of board members who want to talk. Nick, did you have a quick comment before we go to the board members?
Yes, just in reference to our funding for various debt relief. That's something we're going to cover in the next item. But I did want to note that we have around $1 million set for various community engagement efforts focused on debt relief, from supporting signups for the FARE program to signups for the AMP program. A big chunk of these dollars are going to go directly to CBOs to do the outreach. And certainly if we're finding that $1 million is not sufficient and there's more, we will absolutely be planning to come back to the board and ask for more resources. So I just wanted to make that point that, I think in our view, this is not a question of incremental resources going to one place or another place. This is definitely an and conversation.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to call first on Vice Chair Martinez and then on Councilmember Patino from Union City, who is chair of our Marketing and Legislation Committee. Diane?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just touching on what our CEO just mentioned, I did want to highlight that looking at our entire budget, which we will do later this evening, this is not a zero-sum game. I want to thank staff for bringing this item back with the context of this unique opportunity to engage with ratepayers, specifically the context of the investment being a small fraction of our marketing budget, which is again, a fraction of our greater budget. And I think that the Roots are an outstanding community organization and partner. I think that their climate goals are aligned with our message, and I really appreciate their diversity. I'm glad that this additional information was vetted by the marketing committee, and I think this is a really great opportunity. I'm going to be supporting this today. And additionally, I just wanted to add that for my community, I'm especially interested in opportunities to promote care enrollment. And I think that this partnership presents a unique and fruitful way of being able to reach these specific customers. So again, thanks staff for bringing it back.
Thank you, Mayor. No.
Yes, thank you, Chair and Vice Chair. I'm chair of the marketing subcommittee, and I had my reservations at the last time we met about this because it didn't go through the proper channels, did not go through the marketing subcommittee. But I was glad that it did come back, because then we could ask more questions. We had a more in-depth knowledge about what was going on here, and they came back with a lower number that I felt more comfortable with. And we all reached a consensus on this to where it was a level that we were comfortable with. And we did talk about other ways to reach out to the community. Me being on the board of a community health center, I brought up, well, why don't we get our materials about the CARE program and other programs to them? So when they're getting people signed up for Medi-Cal, SNAP, and other programs, we could provide that resource also. We can do that easily. But I think this is a good partnership. It's something I feel comfortable with. As the Vice Chair stated, this is one fraction of the marketing budget, which the marketing budget is one fraction, small fraction of the overall budget. And it's not a zero sum. It's not either or. We can walk and chew gum. We need to be able to do both. We need to be able to do the outreach in the community at the roots level, sorry for the no pun intended, but also we're growing too. We need to expand and start reaching out more at higher levels of thresholds for marketing. So I'm going to vote in favor. I feel comfortable with this. I think this will be money well spent, and it'll bring our brand up to a higher level of visibility. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And next, we'll call in the following order: Councilmember Kick, Mayor Hernandez, Councilmember Marquez, and Councilmember Hannon, and then Councilmember Tiedemann.
Yeah, so I just wanted to talk a little bit about what it means to have a return on investment. And with marketing, it's really difficult to see your return on investment. And it's often a long-term return on investment. We're focused on green energy. And this is not just the current customers, it's our future customers. And so when we're looking at something like a partnership with something like Roots and the children's area specifically, you get kids going to these soccer games with their families. They associate their fun times with their parents with green energy, and they're going to be our customers someday. So it is very difficult to track ROI with something as something like marketing. And I think that we need to understand that customers and people that are listening would be concerned that we're spending what seems like a large amount of money in regular people dollars versus our massive budget of EBCE dollars. But that this is helping us reach not only short-term goals of connecting with current customers, but long-term goals of expanding education and sustainability for generations to come, because you need someone to see your name 7 times before they remember who you are. And so this is just one time they might see us, or maybe they're season pass holders and they're going to see us 7 or 15 times throughout that season. And it's important when we're partnering too, to partner with organizations that share our values. And when I researched Roots, they shared EBCE's values so closely. So if we're going to be giving money to anybody, even if it's not directly being spent on somebody's energy bill, it's being spent on an organization who gives back to the community in a way that I feel EBCE values. So I get this is very outside of the box thinking, but that's why I like it so much, because I feel like, especially in local government and activist world, we're in our own bubble. So people that are showing up to these meetings, we are in a bubble. We know about green energy, and people that are going to soccer games, maybe they're also in that bubble, but there's a good chance that people that are at a Roots game have never been to one of our board meetings. And so it's important to step outside of that, break our bubble, and go out into the world and let people know that green energy is important and we're working on it and we would like their help and support. So I thank you, Annie, for all the work that you've done. I will also be supporting this motion today.
And Mayor Hernandez.
Thank you, Chair Kalb. I just wanted to say thank you to Annie for bringing this back to the marketing committee. I was one of the board of directors that was against it initially because it was not brought forward. But I do want to say thank you to all the remarks. I will not echo the remarks that all my colleagues have said, but I also wanted to share the fact that when the COVID initially started, we stepped up to the plate. We made sure that we were also giving funding to the CBOs out there. In my day job, I work with CBOs every single day. We were paying for making sure that there was food out there. We were making sure that there was rental assistance. So I do feel that we are reaching out to the most vulnerable populations and doing our job as well as we can. With regards to STEM programs, I absolutely agree on that. But I also agree that children, adults should also have physical activity. So also being able to provide funding to STEM programs in the future and also to the Roots, it's all putting it together. You just don't go in one direction because we're not all the same. So with that, I would like to make a motion to move this forward. And I want to thank you to our marketing team.
Thank you very much. There's a motion on the table. I'm going to
second.
And who was that?
Jaime, Director Patino.
Okay, thank you, Jaime. We still have a few more commenters on board members and questions. Councilmember Marquez and then Councilmember Hannan.
Thank you. I wanted to thank my colleagues for raising all their questions and concerns at the last meeting. I appreciate staff for thoroughly vetting this and for taking it back to the marketing committee and for their chance to ask additional questions. I do have a couple questions in regard to the cost of attending the games. Do we have a sense of what the lower ticket level is and the highest level?
Yes, I believe, Annie, if you want to jump in, but I believe the tickets range from $5 or $10 to $25. I think that's generally the range.
Yeah, it's a $20 average. And I also know that in previous seasons, and I'm not sure what it's going to look like this season, the Roots have paid for youth teams or different groups from different elementary schools, but groups of kids to come. And when those kids came, they also provided the transportation and they provided a meal while the kids were at the game. So again, trying to think of sort of all of the needs of the community, not just watching a sports game.
Okay, and are we proposing any type of giveaways to the parents in the kids zone, material, information, items for them to actually walk away with?
Yeah, we haven't done, any in-depth planning on that yet, but certainly there is an opportunity with this sponsorship to be what do they call it? A game title sponsor. So we could provide a promotional giveaway to every person in attendance. And then certainly we could have either informational material or other kind of promotional materials in the kids zone.
Okay, and then in regard to, I know many people have called in and wanting to make sure that we're allocating appropriate funds to paying down debt and maintaining services for our customers. And I know there was an amount of $1 million offered and that we would be able to revisit whether or not that money is working, if it's enough to cover the need in the community. If it's not, will we be doing a mid-year check-in, or when will be our next opportunity to gauge at those numbers?
So yes, we typically do a mid-year budget check-in. Given the magnitude of the funds that we're likely to allocate, I would expect that it's going to take some time for us to build out all the necessary sort of infrastructure to be able to not just make the grants, but manage the grants. We have in our budget, for instance, actually a role to hire somebody to manage these grants and manage these CBO relationships, because we're going to be doing so much of it. So, certainly mid-year, but I would expect that we're going to provide, perhaps, no more than quarterly, but updates as to sort of how things are going with our debt relief and engagement. So, if 3 months in we feel like more resources are needed, we can certainly, we'll make sure to share that.
Okay, thank you. I did briefly look at the website, and I just want to say I'm very impressed with the team. I just look at the players, the staffing, their philosophy, and this feels truly like our community. So I'm happy to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Hannan.
Yes, thank you. I want to thank staff for bringing this item back. I thought your presentation was excellent. Taking it back to the marketing committee, having heard from this board that that's really where we needed to start was outstanding. I thought your presentation was superb. We have a good corporate partner here that's done a lot for our communities, and it's really our opportunity to tag along with them and work with the successes that they've created throughout their communities as well. As mentioned by one of my colleagues, marketing takes on many different forms, and we need to reach that as broad a client base as we can moving forward. And this is simply one of those efforts. And I just want to say outstanding job, staff, and I'll support the motion as well.
Thank you. Councilmember Tiedemann from Albany.
Just wanted to echo what all of my colleagues on the marketing committee have said. I think staff did a very effective job in that meeting of making clear why the Roots is the right place to go with this and how difficult it is to find an organization that captures the customer base for EBCE, because it is very difficult to find that, and that we've found that partner here. As well as echo that, this isn't either or with equity concerns. We're going to keep that conversation going, and, we have to be able to do this and get more customers and retain more people and get more name out there and undertake equity. And I have confidence that we'll do that.
Thank you. Councilmember Lopez.
Thank you very much. I have a quick question on the slide here about the continue to work with local cultural figures and artists like Timothy B., etc. It says here Vogue out of San Leandro. I actually have not heard of Vogue out of San Leandro, and I've lived here for 20 years. Maybe it's a genre that I don't listen to, but I looked it up and I also didn't find it on the web. Can you indicate Vogue out of San Leandro?
Yeah, I know that we have Taylor. So I, as well, am not familiar with all of what the cool kids are doing these days. But I know that
I guess we're not cool. That makes two of us that are not cool, right?
So Taylor Beggs, who's the Director of Partnerships with the Roots, is on as a participant right now. I'm not sure if we can, Taylor, maybe you could raise your hand, but he is texting me in real time and telling me that Vogue is a local paint artist out of San Leandro.
Yeah, I did see that, and it said that it's permanently closed.
So Vogue,
that
Vogue is a public artist. So, you know, I think Vogue, I'm just looking, you know, say, I won't say specifically, but, you know, if you're in downtown Oakland, there's some of these large murals of the rise and grind Oakland A's murals. So Vogue is an artist who does those kinds of murals and has about 30,000 Instagram followers.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Yeah, because I don't see I didn't see that it was a form of music, unlike the other artists. And then I did notice that this person was an artist and in a different form, and then saw that the place is not open, that it's permanently closed. So I don't think this person's in San Leandro anymore. But that being said, I mean, I think I really like the proven community commitment slide. I think this is, like Councilmember Marquez said, this is really sort of reflects who we are, I think, as a community in general and our demographics. I'm happy to be supporting this evening. I do want to see, you know, I'm happy that there's this reach into lots of communities throughout the service area. I think that's important to do. You know, I mean, I was taking a look at, you know, earlier on, you know, the slides of, you know, monies coming into the community. I was very happy for the other communities. San Leandro was not on the list. I don't see really San Leandro on this list either. I will just have to put a placeholder here and say, I really would like to highly encourage that some of these activities, either by Roots or, you know, investments made in other forms by EBCE, do happen. I know that have happened in the past in San Leandro, but not recently. So I'd like for that to continue to happen in these ways too, you know, for our youth here in our community and for the arts. So I will touch base with staff separately and maybe brainstorm maybe if there's some opportunities in the future going forward with that. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilmember Cox.
Thank you. I just want to thank the marketing team, the marketing due process that happened between last month and this month's meeting. I did want to put some things in perspective based on some other research for U.S. small businesses. They recommend that in spending revenue for marketing, you spend 7 to 8% of the revenue on marketing. And that's providing in a category if you're only making sales of 5 million in sales per year. And so, you know, the amounts will vary based on the business and some other factors. But when you hear that it's, you know, a very low percentage over time of less than 1%, and I do a lot of marketing in my past life of marketing contracts, and 125 is very modest. And if you think of the Super Bowl, when you have that 1 30-second type advertising, you're talking a couple $1 million for that 1 second. So just wanted to put some things in magnitude and perspective when we're talking about this type of marketing, and it could be all kinds of things wrapped in there. That 125 is a very reasonable to be able to create more opportunities and branding awareness in the community. So I will be supporting it. So just wanted to add some other background information on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other hands in the queue, Mr. Clerk, we have a motion by Hernandez and a second by Patino, and we can call the.
Great, thank you. Alameda County. Albany.
Yes.
Berkeley.
She had to go to a town hall, so she's excused.
Okay, great. Thank you. Dublin?
Yes.
Fremont?
Yes.
Hayward?
Yes.
Livermore?
Yes.
Thank you. Newark?
Aye.
Piedmont?
Yes.
Pleasanton? Yes. San Leandro.
Aye.
Tracy.
Yes.
Union City.
Yes.
Emeryville.
Aye.
And Oakland.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you all for this consideration, the thoughtfulness that went into this. And thank you to the staff for working on this. So we have one more item, that's our budget. Again, this is an informational item today. We will be voting on the budget next month. Sorry for the lateness of the hour right now, but let's see if we can get through this and get some questions on the table to the staff.
Thank you very much, Dan. I'm going to move quickly through this. We have presented this to the Finance Committee, so some of you have seen this already. We are presenting this again next week to the executive, and then it will come back to the full board in a month for ratification. So, you know, I want to move through it quickly so we can really have a discussion. So can we go to the next slide, Adrian? Adrian, next slide, please. Okay, so, you know, I would say the highlights, you know, as first and foremost, when we go through the budgeting process, that also means we're going through a review of our value proposition. Our value proposition is our discount relative to PG&E and our power content relative to PG&E. So I think the most significant highlight here is we are proposing no change to our value proposition, which means we intend to continue to deliver a 1% discount and 5% higher renewables for this coming fiscal year. You know, the other highlights in this budget are we are seeing both significant revenue growth, but also significant growth in our expenses. The growth in revenue, growth of expenses actually are largely in line, roughly 23 to 24% year over year. These increases are largely driven by the fact that we are bringing 3 new communities on. So we're increasing our load by roughly 15 or so percent. We are seeing some higher energy costs associated with higher costs of electricity and commodities, but we're also assuming some higher revenues associated with our load being higher due to forecasts for hotter weather. Kind of our overall highlight of our budget is we are projecting $13 million in net revenue, which is roughly a 3.5% margin. That 3.5% margin, you know, is subject to change, given that the primary drivers of our revenue expenses are the cost of a commodity that can change over the course of the year, and the amount of revenue is the amount of electricity usage that we see, which can change over the course of the year. But at this point, we are forecasting around a 3.5% positive margin, which, you know, all things considered is a really positive thing. Some of the changes that we are seeing that you'll note, you know, is a fairly significant increase in our personnel costs, but also a fairly significant decrease in our professional services costs. So what we're finding there is basically we are insourcing. We are moving away from consultant spend, and we are hiring staff, and in some cases licensing software for staff to use instead of spending money on consultants. So that's the large driver there. We'll get in a moment to the actual increase in staffing. We also are building in a what I'll call a contingency for capital expenditure. We are in the process of evaluating the potential to make a real estate purchase for kind of EBCE's long-term office site. And so we have set aside up to $2.5 million for such an increase. We also are proposing an increase of over $2 million to our local development budget. Next slide, please. When we think about our this past fiscal year, I'm going to spend even less time on this. You know, this current fiscal year has ended up being quite a bit more positive than we had forecast. Initially, we had forecast a almost what would amount to almost a break even, so only less than $3 million of net revenue. What we experienced was over $25 million in net revenue. That's largely due to the fact that there's been a deferral in some of our payments that we have to make for the PCIA. And that deferral was an amortization of the PCIA from 1 year of payments that would have hit this year to 3 years. So they're spreading, in our case, it's roughly $60 million of liability that we would have had to pay this year spread over 3 years. And because of that, we're actually experiencing higher revenue this year than we had forecast, because we actually built into our revenue model the full amortization in 2021. But what we're doing, because we do see a future liability out there, we are deferring $20.4 million in our GASB 62 revenue deferral account, which is going to sit there for what I would call sort of the PCIA rainy day. This is money that we will be able to use in a future fiscal year, not this coming fiscal year, but a future fiscal year, to offset the effect of the PCIA and effectively help us maintain our value propositions, help us maintain our discount relative to PG&E. The other thing I'll note here is we have largely seen the level of uncollectibles that we had forecast. So at the beginning of the fiscal year, we assumed 2.5% uncollectibles. So that's 2.5% of revenue would not be collected from customers. That's up from our previous standard assumption of 0.5%. That 2.5% was a bit of a guess, I'll say, but it is actually a guess that's ended up being pretty close to what we've experienced. So 2.5% equaled just about 10 million. Now we're seeing almost 11 million, but we also are seeing higher electricity sales. So that 10.7, again, is just about 2.5. So pretty good guess on our part. These are funds that, when we talk about debt relief, will actually be funds that are going to go towards providing customer debt relief. These uncollectibles at some point in time will either need to be collected from customers or written off. So when we talk about customer debt relief, it really is the write-off of the future write-off of these uncollectibles that wipes that debt off of the customer bill. Next slide, please. I think, I've largely touched on sort of the factors here around why we're seeing increased electricity sales. Some of the key assumptions are we are assuming a 5% opt-out from our new communities. As mentioned earlier, we're currently under 4%. So that's, I would say, a fairly conservative estimate of new community opt-outs. If, new community opt-outs end up at 4, that could mean even higher levels of revenue. I think the key point to emphasize here is that we are expecting some reduction in levels of uncollectibles. So while this current fiscal year, we're assuming 2.5, for the next fiscal year, we're actually assuming a stair step to down 2% for the first half and down to 1.5% for the second half. This is these stair steps are supported by our kind of analysis of customer arrearages and the fact that we are seeing a slowing in customer non-payment happening as the economy starts to grow up, as more of our customers are, say, participating in unemployment or are seeing other benefits coming in and able to get back to work. Next slide, please. So, not surprisingly, the vast majority of our expenses are energy expenses, cost of energy. That includes the commodity and things like resource adequacy, which you'll have heard us talk about. This includes all of our renewable energy purchases, all our carbon-free energy purchases. Because we are planning to close Renewable 100 in January 2022, there is a forecast reduction in some of these energy costs. I think one of the sensitivities that we'll see here, but it's also sensitivity on the revenue side, is we made an assumption that 90% of Brilliant 100 customers would migrate to Bright Choice and 10% would migrate to Renewable 100. It may end up from what we're hearing from your cities being the opposite of that. 90% of our customers will migrate to Renewable 100 and 10% to Bright Choice. But there's a reciprocity in increased energy expenses and buying more renewable energy and increased revenue. So yes, we may see higher energy expense, but we'll also see increased revenue as customers go on to Renewable 100. Next slide, please. Now we talk about our overhead. So, first and foremost, I think one thing that we are seeking to reinstate, given that we are seeing kind of a more positive fiscal picture this coming year as opposed to the beginning of last fiscal years, we are reinstating our cost of living adjustment. Last year, we did not offer a cost of living adjustment, and instead we offered extra vacation that employees could convert to a bonus or seek to keep. This year, we are reinstating a 2.5% cost of living adjustment, which reflects a 3-year average for Alameda County. And we're also setting aside a bonus merit promotion pool that we're going to allocate based on the completion of our reviews process. This is also something we're going to be bringing back to provide a little bit more input to the board, or information to the board rather, about kind of our methodology for making these merit and promotion compensation decisions. And that's something we'll do in June. We are proposing to hire 6 additional staff, 2 in local development, 2 in marketing, 1 in power resources, 1 in technology. In our local development side of things, we're proposing to hire a leader to do customer outreach and acquisition for transportation electrification. We are in the process of seeking to build and invest in electric vehicle charging stations, and we want to really encourage customers to, whether they be public sector or private sector, to consider adoption of electric vehicles. So having a lead doing that. We're also hiring somebody to focus on CBO outreach for connected communities, and in particular the AMP program. That's the person who's going to go help deploy those CBO dollars. For marketing, we're looking to hire a campaigns manager, really focus on our programs, running customer campaigns, and a call center leader. We are in the process of seeking to select a call center vendor right now. We issued an RFP this year, and so we're reviewing those RFP results. And so one of the parameters that, irrespective of who we select, that is going to be part of the sort of next phase of our customer service is a locally domiciled call center. And so we intend to hire somebody to support that. We're hiring another staff person to support our power procurement efforts. We procure $450 million a year in energy. That's a really core set of capabilities. And so we want to continually grow that team. And then we have somebody that we're bringing on to support ongoing sort of implementation of Salesforce. For the rest, we have no significant changes to our marketing, regulatory, other professional services relative to last year, apart from some reduction in our other professional services to reflect kind of this insourcing trend. Next slide, please. I think the key thing to point to here is the potential for a capital expenditure of $2.5 million. Again, it may be less than that, so we put a little more in here so that we would have more flexibility to assess different property types. And we think about our borrowing expense. This is largely reflecting of the carrying costs of our credit facility. So we have an $80 million credit facility. That $80 million credit facility costs money to maintain. We have not drawn upon it apart from the use of some letters of credit, but there's just a cost of carrying that credit facility. And I'm going to talk about local development on the next slide. Local development, next slide, please. Thank you. This is a bit of an eye chart here. There's a lot going on. And, one of the dynamics we see year over year is we allocate funds, we earmark dollars, in a fiscal year for local development. But at times it can be, what we see is those funds don't actually get spent. You're launching a new customer program, and you want to say, we're going to put $1 million for that customer program in the given year. But it takes time to actually staff the program up, go acquire customers, go acquire partners, and actually cut checks. So there can be a lag between when the funds are earmarked and when the checks are cut. And so that is sort of the explanation for why there's a carryover year to year. This current FY, we are proposing $8.125 million from our funds, with some additional funds of $382,000 coming from some external grants we're receiving from the California Energy Commission and the US EPA. These funds are split across a number of program areas. The three largest program areas receiving funds are building electrification, vehicle electrification, and community investment. In building electrification, it's really two incentive programs. One is an incentive program for commercial kitchens to electrify, so to move from using natural gas to electric induction. And the other is for a low-income electrification incentive program, predominantly installing electric heat pumps. And in vehicle electrification, the vast majority of these funds are actually going to capital investments. The reason why this is a much larger dollar amount than the other programs is these are capital expenditures as opposed to incentives or programs that we're managing. And so capital expenditures, require more upfront capital, but there's also a payback on those capital expenditures as opposed to, say, an incentive where there may not necessarily be a payback or a direct payback. That is, there may be other benefits certainly, but there's not a direct return on the incentive dollar per se, or so it's a little bit more attenuated, I would say. So in that $5.3 million, big focus on public DC fast charging. So public fast charging for light duty vehicles. Within that, a real emphasis on deploying charging in and adjacent to multi-unit dwellings. So apartment buildings that may not have access to charging in their garages, and in low and moderate income communities. So that overlap of multi-unit dwellings and low and moderate income communities is really sort of the sweet spot for where we're focusing on deploying charging. Right now, we have three specific projects that we're working on, one in the city of Oakland, one in the city of Livermore, and one in the city of Piedmont. These funds will partially go to support those projects, but really will go to even more infrastructure deployment that we're going to be pursuing here in the coming year. There's also a real emphasis here on medium and heavy duty transportation. And so when we think about the real most detrimental pollution in the East Bay, it's largely coming from medium and heavy duty trucking, originating particularly from the Port of Oakland, but really trucking all along the 80 and 580 corridors. And so we're going to be spending a good chunk of funds trying to really push the electrification of medium and heavy duty trucking and deliver really outsized benefits to our communities who live next to our freeways. And then the other major investment area is our community investment program. So the two major areas of expenditure here are connected communities. This is where we're going to be spending money, that $1 million on community outreach for customers to encourage customers to sign up for the Care and Fair program, to sign up for the arrearage management program, to partner with cities that are running various programs to support utility debt relief and help customers stay in their homes. Here is also where we're funding our incentive program for medical baseline customers. So our customers who have a medical device that requires electricity, we're actually going on buying batteries. So if on our consent agenda, we actually had a line item to allow us to go and buy $150,000 or so of batteries to give out to customers who have durable medical devices, oxygen concentrators, insulin, feeding pumps, not an insulin pump, a feeding pump, a ventilator, a wheelchair. So these batteries will be given out to those to customers who have those durable medical devices, and we're actually providing another tranche of funds here to do that. And in collaborative procurement, I think there was some discussion of resiliency hubs. So we are running a resiliency hub program, our municipal solar and storage program and our resilient home programs. In both cases, they're providing resiliency. There's not a lot of money in this because the program is actually being pursued as a procurement initiative. So there's not a lot of incremental program cost. We're actually buying a grid service from these critical facilities, these multi-unit buildings, from residences. And so, it's quite a bit of money, but it's not program money. It's actually a grid service, but that grid service check that we're writing back to the customer is helping make the difference so they can actually adopt the solar. So there, we expect, somewhere in the order of 1,000 multi-unit dwellings, so apartments, are going to benefit from that program. We're actively working on our resilient home program where we have, over time, we'll hopefully get up to 1,000, 2,000 residential solar and storage deployments. And then, we're this summer going to sort of be starting the process to deploy the first 40 solar and storage systems on municipal critical facilities. So those will be the resilience hubs. And I think once that program ramps up, I would expect that, we will be well over 100 resilience hubs built around Alameda County and in Tracy. So that is the local development fund overview. I will say, like, at our next meeting, we're going to be providing a more detailed breakout of all these programs. So, there will be plenty more opportunity to see even more detailed breakdown at the executive committee and then at our next board meeting. Next slide, please. So I think the last thing is to touch on risks and uncertainties. As I said, our biggest cost centers are our energy prices. These energy prices are variable. Yes, we hedge a significant amount of our energy costs, but up to say 30-35% of our portfolio does have some market price exposure, and volatility of 10 or 20% on that 30% is not unreasonable. So if you think about the top volatility of 20% on a 35% unhedged portfolio, that is a 7% swing up or down on our energy costs. 7% on 450 million is around $25 million. So we could reasonably end up $40 million in the black or $15 million in the red. And that's just volatility that we have to accept. I think we're in a financial position that I have no concerns about our ability to ride through through that volatility, but that is volatility, and we will be reporting back to the board in mid-year to share what volatility we've observed through the first 6 months of the year. There's also the PCIA risk. Right now we're forecasting the 2022 PCIA. We don't know what it's going to be. We won't actually have the actual PCIA until November of 2021, which makes forecasting revenue very challenging, but we do our best, and we have multiple sources of our PCIA forecast, which gives us some level of confidence of what it's going to be. One of the reasons we're pursuing this prepay structure is to actually structurally reduce our costs. So that's one of the tools that we have available to us to manage these risks. We also have the risk of uncollectibles and write-offs being higher than expected. We are forecasting on average of this FY of 1.75% of uncollectibles. That could end up being higher, could end up being closer to 2 or 2.5% or higher than that. And so that's just something that could happen. Again, I think we're trending down. So that's the right direction. And with programs like the arrearage management program that allow us to recoup some of these arrearages from the state and other debt relief programs, we think there's upside in our ability to actually collect, both support debt relief for our customers, but also recoup some of these funds from the state. And then there's always opt-out risk. I think right now we're seeing kind of the level of opt-out we would expect from our new communities around 3.5%. That may rise to around 4%, perhaps even 5%. But I think at this time, we do not see significant opt-out risk on the horizon. All right. Whew. Done.
Okay, thank you, Nick. Appreciate it. We do have a couple of questions from board members, and of course, we will take public comment in just a moment. First, Councilmember Cox, and then Councilmember Lopez.
Sorry, it's by mistake. I didn't lower it from the last question.
Oh, no problem. Councilmember Lopez.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for the information and for giving it to us in advance so we could go through it and think about it over the month. So my question is on the uncollectibles and potential write-offs there. What of this amount? What what pertains to care customers, either by percentage or dollar terms?
So what I can say is, of the $11 million of arrearages last year, the around 4.5 or so million pertains to care customers who have a significant arrearage. So an arrearage of over $200.
Okay, so so a little less than half. You know, I know we've had this conversation on the arrears, the money's arrear, and you know, it's significant, and there's a lot of exposure there. And you know, I've articulated this in the executive committee meetings, and that I think that we probably need to be realistic here and consider having to write off at least the care customer account, and just, you know, give those customers a clean slate coming out of COVID. I know it's a lot of money and I know it's a big ask, but I also know that these individuals are facing food insecurity, housing insecurity, probably arrears and other utility payments and so forth and so on. Loss of jobs, you know, higher unemployment. At least we have higher unemployment here in San Leandro. And, you know, higher housing density, which impacts, you know, COVID rates of infection. I mean, all of these compounded effects has really beleaguered our low-income communities in the service area. And so I think we're going to have to really think very hard about, you know, giving these folks a break, or being realistic that we probably won't collect them anyway, and consider doing the write-off and having a serious conversation around this topic. The others, you know, I think, you know, perhaps a payment plan so that it's smoother for folks, you know, but, you know, that's where I'm at there. I just think that it's just going to be very, very difficult for people to ever get caught up that are economically disadvantaged. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Clerk, let's call our public speakers, please.
Great. We have 3 speakers for this item: Jessica Tovar, Barbara Stebbins, and Audrey Ichinose. Jessica Tovar, I am unmuting you now.
Jessica Tovar, East Bay Clean Power Alliance. One of the things that I wanted to ask was why you have omitted community innovation grants. It seems that money has now been being used, I think, for COVID relief. And while I understand that last year we had an abrupt shutdown, why are you omitting community innovation grants when people have specifically community organizations have been waiting for that opportunity to apply for those grants, specifically for local solar and battery storage, and specifically around the resilience hub for community groups. So that is a concern of mine. The other thing is, it just seems like COVID relief shouldn't be in the local development business plan, when the whole point of that budget item is for building out local assets and programs and projects that pertain to you know, approaches to local clean energy, really. And so that to me is a concern, and where in the budget would fall resilience hub infrastructure for community groups, because from what I understand is under critical facilities, community groups, community driven resilience hubs is not covered. And so you should be allocating money for that, so that local trusted community resilience hubs actually can access the funding that they need, as well as the technical assistance from East Bay Community Energy, so that we can be included in that. And then finally, what's really important is to have a breakdown of where each program falls under these different areas, because that's very unclear right now, and how much of the money is actually allocated to each program. Thank you.
Thank you. Barbara Stebbins, you are unmuted.
Okay, so I'll kind of pick up where Jessica left off. We want to be really clear about the fact that resilience hubs are not the same as critical facilities. There is some overlap, probably. I think schools are considered critical facilities, and those could potentially be very good resilience hubs, and in fact, very resourced resilience hubs. But the fact is, critical facilities generally apply to police stations, fire stations, and kind of other municipal buildings that are not necessarily places where people in communities are going to be able to access during the power shutoffs. So when we talk about resilience hubs, it's really different from critical facilities. I want to remind the board that they got a letter from East Bay Clean Power Alliance urging prioritization of programs that will advance equity in the local development business plan. We're asking that at least 40% of the local development business plan be for programs that will really address the inequity that it has been perpetuated from the fossil fuel economy, actually from slave days all the way through. We know President Biden is quite aware of that and has actually pledged to try and get 40% that would be to address this gap for frontline communities. We have a number of issues. Jessica mentioned some. The other program that shouldn't be in the local development business plan is sponsorship and events. We don't understand why that is in there. The COVID one we know is really important. We're not objecting to that one, but it doesn't really, it's not about development of local clean energy resources, which is what that fund was originally intended for. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, we have one last speaker, Audrey Ichinose. I'm unmuting you now.
Thank you. I'll be brief. CARE and FERA enrollment has become more and more important to EBCE's community investment budget and leveraging funds from outside. At Monday's CAC meeting, we learned that EBCE's current CARE FERA enrollment is 128,667. And I think that's great. The number is impressive given that EBCE started with 550,000 accounts in 2017. And I think the enrollment can be higher. Staff says that it has no access to income data in our service territory, so it cannot say how much more can be enrolled. Here is where I think all board members everywhere in our territory can lend staff a hand. You all have a sense of how your constituents are doing and where income eligible care customers are to be found in your jurisdictions. It would help EBCE if each of you or one of your staff could liaise with EBCE staff to check whether and where more outreach is needed. Maximizing CARE FERA enrollment is important because it's a first step toward a kinder, more equitable society, and it should not be seen as a stigmatizing mark at all. And I appreciate the comments of Director Patino and Director Lopez in their interest in including CARE FERA enrollment as important part of their outreach. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Colleagues, I know this is a late hour here, and of course, we're not voting on this today, but nevertheless, if you have a question or comment you want to make now, there are other options as well. You could always send in your questions to staff. The executive committee will be listening to and discussing this next Friday at noon. That's the it's the 28th at noon. And of course, any board member is welcome to attend all or part of any XCOM meeting. So I'll look to anybody who has, if you want to raise their hand. I know it's rather late right now. I'm not seeing any hands raised. Nick, did you have a closing comment?
Nope. Thank you.
Okay, not seeing any hands raised, so I'm going to just bring this item to a close and ask that you all read this prior to the next board meeting. If you have questions in advance, please do send them to Nick. And of course, like I said, the XCOM will be also discussing this next Friday. Okay, Mr. Clerk, that's our agenda. I believe the last item is our standard announcements and what have you. So I will ask if any board members have any announcements or any staff have any announcements that might be of interest to all of us. Hold on a sec. Okay. Do we usually have speakers for announcement? I'm happy to allow a member of the public to make a quick announcement as well, although we don't usually do that, but happy to do that. So let's look at here. I'm not seeing any board members. Did you, Mr. Clerk, you said one of our members of the public has a quick announcement to make. Is that right?
Yes. So we recognize Jessica Tovar.
Great. Go ahead, Jessica.
Sorry, that was a mistake. I think my hand was still raised from earlier.
Okay.
Oh, okay, no problem. Okay, not seeing any more hands raised. Again, apologize for the late hour. Thank you so much for listening in and participating in this meeting. We have a lot of work we got done, a lot of work to do, and this meeting is now adjourned.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Good night, all.